Chapter 1380 3-Starred Soul Master. Chapter 1380 3-Starred Soul Master. Screech. A shrill cry was heard across the universe. A crimson phoenix appeared before the Hungry Wolves clan before Shuefeng. Then, the feathers on the crimson phoenix turned into crimson flowing lights, and merged into the Hungry Wolves clan members with terrifying speed. A dozen Hungry Wolves clan members paused in the void. Then fumble. Almost half of them fell forward. What? This is a consciousness attack. It's Soul Master. They have Soul Master among them. The remaining Hungry Wolves clan members screamed, but didn't dare to move forward. The leader of the Hungry Wolves clan, the man in the gold mask, took one step back and looked at the person next to him. May, what's going on? I never expected that there would be 2 Soul Masters in this troop. And there's one Soul Master that I can't even detect. The person in the black robe named May lowered her voice and replied. However, although I can't detect his existence, his consciousness attack wasn't strong. His earlier technique was fierce, but it only killed a level 1 Divine General. He didn't kill just level 2 Divine Generals though. It obviously meant that he wasn't too high of a level 2. He is at most a 2-starred Soul Master, and he has just leveled up very recently. 2-starred Soul Master? You take care of him then, the man in gold mask said. No problem. The person in the black robe named May nodded and took a step forward. On the other side, Jian Wushuang, standing among Shuefeng's troop, looked rather cold. I am out of practice. The earlier technique collapsed on the way. Otherwise, there are not many from the Hungry Wolves clan who could have survived the technique earlier, Jian Wushuang thought in his head. His soul strength was near to the level of a peak universe god in the 3rd heaven. If he were to put his full power to play, even a universe god in the 3rd heaven wouldn't be able to resist. Even if it was a group attack, it wasn't something a 2nd-level Divine General could withstand either. However, when the Crimson Phoenix swept out, it only killed those first level 1 Divine Generals. Jian Wushuang lifted his head. He had already seen the person in the black robe, named May, walking towards him. I never expected that there would be a 2-starred Soul Master in your little troop. I wonder, what's the 2-starred Soul Master's name? May asked. Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang replied straight away. Jian Wushuang. May kept quiet for a while, but she shook her head after that. I know any 2-starred Soul Masters who are slightly famous, but I've never heard of you. It seems that you only just broke through and became a 2-starred Soul Master. How about this? I shall give you a chance to join the Hungry Wolves clan. This way you can save your own life. Jian Wushuang sneered at what she said. If you were to kneel down and bow before me to ask for mercy, I would let you live. You're asking for it. There was a flash of coolness in May's eyes. The very next moment, swoosh. A huge black shadow that was formed by consciousness suddenly charged towards Jian Wushuang. The black shadow was a huge cobra. Not only was the cobra huge in size, but it was also extremely flexible. I'm impressed. This person's manipulation of consciousness is much stronger than Shuetong. Jian Wushuang complimented in silence, but his eyes suddenly turned cold. Hong! His soul power suddenly erupted. Then, Jian Wushuang had never performed 5 beast soul manipulation knack, but straightaway performed a soul constrain vigorously. Soul power that was close to a peak in the 3rd heaven was like a heavy hammer, then suddenly slammed down onto the plundering cobra. It shattered the cobra into pieces and continued to move forward at May. How is this possible? There was an unprecedented terror in May's eyes below the black mask. Her eyes were wide open. 3-starred. 3-starred Soul Master. A shrill voice was heard from May and her eyes grew dim. Swoosh. May's figure fell down. The sight shocked everyone on the scene, including the siblings, Shuefeng and Shuetong. 3-starred Soul Master? Everyone couldn't help but mumble to themselves. In Tianling land, if a 2-starred Soul Master was rare, a 3-starred Soul Master was even more hard to come by. In the nearby towns, there was definitely less than 5 3-starred Soul Masters. Such big figures would definitely make everyone around the region shiver in fear. Then there was such existence before them. Damn it! The leader of the Hungry Wolves clan, The man in the gold mask roared and glared at Jian Wushuang. In Tianyuan land, soul masters were scary, and they were definitely the strongest players within their own level. For instance, a 2-starred soul master would be much stronger compared to a 2nd-level divine general. Then, a 3-starred soul master was naturally much stronger than an ordinary level 3 divine general. Let's go. Although the man in gold mask was upset, he could only leave. Under his command, the rest of the Hungry Wolves clan members let out a breath of relief and retreated. They were really not brave enough to fight against a 3-starred soul master. However, just as the man in gold mask turned to leave, "You come as you wish and leave as you wish. Aren't you living a little too comfortably?" Jian Wushuang's cold voice rang out. Then, the Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hands. Wah! Jian Wushuang moved and suddenly charged forward. Such speed! Xuefeng, Xuetong, and the people in their troop were terrified by the speed Jian Wushuang revealed. Such a speed was obviously faster than any of theirs. The man in the gold mask saw that Jian Wushuang moved forward directly. He wasn't angry, but actually happy instead. "Son, you're just a soul master, and you dared to fight in close combat with me." The man in the gold mask had a murderous intention that was flaring up. 3-starred soul master was scary indeed. However, such terror only existed when there was a certain distance between him and the opponent. Then he could opt to fight with soul power. But then, Jian Wushuang charged towards him to fight in close combat recklessly. Wasn't he asking for death? On the Tianling Mystery Land, which soul master dared to fight close combat with a warrior? Die! The man in the gold mask immediately took out a huge axe and wielded it with strong strength. Jian Wushuang too erupted his power to its limit and performed a unique skill. Ghosting. Boundless sword lights swept out and overlapped at a terrifying speed. It was as though thousands of millions of sword lights had gathered in the same spot. The power of sword light then exploded. Dang! After a loud collision, a terrifying power swept through the surroundings. After another loud clash, the man in the gold mask staggered and fell backwards. Chapter 1381 Hatred. Chapter 1381, Hatred. How can be it possible? The man in the golden mask was shocked. So were other members in the Hungry Wolves clan and Xuefeng's group. Jian Wushuang not only was a level 3 soul master with formidable power, but had other formidable skills? He had defeated a 3-level divine general. Seriously? No one could believe their eyes. Even Jian Wushuang was surprised to see that he was powerful enough to blast the man out with only one sword. But he soon realized why. Soul masters were more powerful than divine general of the same level. Not because soul masters were geniuses, but because divine generals were relatively weak in the whole Tianling Mystery Land. Jian Wushuang knew that at the beginning of the battle, although the man was a level 3 divine general, equivalent to a universe god in the 3rd heaven of the eternal chaotic world, but he was absolutely not as powerful as he was supposed to be. Jian Wushuang grinned. I think his divine power was no more than the level of a peak universe god in the 2nd heaven. I guess he doesn't even know what secret skills are. Go! The gold-masked man chose to escape. But Jian Wushuang didn't give him any opportunity. He waved his sword as fast as a flash, using soul attack that the man couldn't resist at all. The sword stabbed through the man's throat. The man died. Seeing this, his members were scared to death and ran away as fast as they could. Jian Wushuang didn't follow them. Everything became peaceful again. Xuefeng and Xuefeng went to Jian Wushuang with fear. Thank you, Master Wushuang. Xuefeng showed his respect. Other members except Xuefeng didn't even dare to look at him. Jian Wushuang was so formidable for them. Are you okay? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes. Without your help, we couldn't escape from death. Xuefeng said gratefully. All the cultivators will respect and admire you if they know you have killed a vicious gang for us. It's just a little help worth nothing. Jian Wushuang said. Let's set out again. Okay. Soon they went on with the journey. But on the journey, everyone was silent, continuously recalling what had happened. When they left the forest, Xuetong, after a long time of consideration, said to Jian Wushuang, "Could I be your disciple? I can serve you for my life." Jian Wushuang felt surprised. Xue Feng also said sincerely, "My sister is gifted in consciousness and she works hard. We will be grateful if you could accept her." After all, few talents were as powerful as Jian Wushuang. And Xue Feng and Xue Tong didn't want to miss the chance. Jian Wushuang showed his hesitation. Xue Tong looked at Jian Wushuang with great eagerness. But Jian Wushuang said, "Sorry, I can't." He had to refuse. First, he would leave the Tianling Mystery Land soon. Second, and more importantly, he was not qualified to teach her. His control on consciousness was actually not as good as Xue Tong. So he had no other choices. Xue Tong felt disappointed. So was Xue Feng. But he continued to say, "Or could you please introduce another soul master to us?" Jian Wushuang became unhappy about Xue Feng's requirement. Even Xue Tong was annoyed by her brother. He shouldn't ask for that much. After all, Jian Wushuang had saved them, but it was not his responsibility. Sorry. Xue Feng realized he was imprudent. "Why do you want to find a master for you sister so urgently?" Jian Wushuang asked. Xue Feng paused for a while and said, "To be honest, it is because we have to take revenge for our parents, our family members and all others in our tribe, who were killed by our enemies. However, I lost the opportunity to cultivate to be a talent. So all the hopes fall on my sister. She is gifted in consciousness. If she can learn from a talent and be an excellent soul master, we could take revenge." Xue Feng clenched his hands. Jian Wushuang also saw the hatred in their eyes. The scene resonated Jian Wushuang. Since he had started to journey of cultivation, he also had been bearing such a hatred. Just like Xue Feng and Xue Tong. It was the hatred that led him to make such great progress. Chapter 1382 Soul Master Hall. Chapter 1382 Soul Master Hall. I will not take any disciples. However, if I come across any suitable soul master, I shall recommend him to you. Jian Wushuang said casually. "Thank you, master." Xue Feng and Xue Tong expressed their gratitude. "Oh yeah, in the town on the border of the forest, is there a soul master hall?" Jian Wushuang asked. After familiarizing himself with Xue Feng's troop in the past few days, Jian Wushuang found out that the place with the most soul masters gathering together was the Soul Master Hall. In Tianling Land, many soul masters were required to get recognition from Soul Master Hall, or to pass through the examination. Jian Wushuang wanted to familiarize himself with 5 beast soul manipulation knack, and he had to communicate more with other soul masters. Visiting the Soul Master Hall would be the best choice. In the nearby town, the only Soul Master Hall is in White Sun Town. If you want to head there, we can bring you over. It happens to be time for my sister to sit for a test in Soul Master Hall, to become a real 1-starred soul master, Xue Feng said. "Let's go together then," Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. Xue Feng's troop continued their journey together. After they exited the forest, it only took 1 day's time to arrive at White Sun Town. As the only town that had Soul Master Hall in the nearby towns, White Sun Town was rather busy. A lofty black castle was where the Soul Master Hall was located. "Master Wushuang, that's Soul Master Hall. You can enter with my sister. We shall wait outside," Xue Feng said. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then, he entered the black castle with Xue Tong. In the lobby of the castle, it was rather crowded. There were many soul masters that gathered together and chatting among themselves. At the same time, there were people queuing up in the middle of the lobby. These people came to become soul masters. Jian Wushuang looked at people in the long queue and he smiled. "Master Wushuang, let's go in queue." Xue Tong obviously couldn't wait. Jian Wushuang and Xue Tong started waiting in the queue. Soon it was their turn. "You go ahead first," Jian Wushuang said. Xue Tong nodded and went forward. In one breath, fill up the crystal with your consciousness. Then, you can consider yourself to have passed through fundamental recognition. Then, you will be qualified to join the 1-starred Soul Master examination. The man in the black robe passed a purple crystal to Xue Tong. Xue Tong took a deep breath, and covered the crystal with her consciousness in the next instance. In a while, the purple crystal was shimmering with purple brilliance. Not bad. The man in the black robe took out a token and passed it to Shuatong. Take this token and wait by the side. There'll be someone to bring you to the examination later. Thanks. Shuatong took the token and thanked him. She then walked to the side and waited. Next, the man in the black robe said lazily. Jian Wushuang walked forward. Same goes to you. Fill this crystal in one breath. The man in the black robe said coldly. Jian Wushuang took over the purple crystal and fiddled with it in his hands. He then put it down and said with a smile, Your crystal can only recognize one-starred soul masters, right? The man in the black robe was stunned and recalled her sloppy attitude earlier. He revealed a smile and asked, Unless you want to receive recognition of being a 2-starred soul master. 2-starred soul master? Jian Wushuang smiled. No, I want to receive recognition of a 3-starred soul master. 3-starred. The man in black robe stared. Everyone in the lobby looked at Jian Wushuang. 3-starred soul master was almost non-existent in the nearby towns of White Sun Town. Moss master. You want to receive recognition as a 3-starred soul master? The man in the black robe's voice was shivering. Why can't I? Jian Wushuang smiled and said. No, but the man in black robe was stuttering. Just then, what's going on? An old voice suddenly rang out, and an elderly with white hair and a beard who looked like he had a divine demeanor walked forward slowly. Master He. Soul Master He. He was the only peaked 2-starred soul master in White Sun Town. The moment he arrived in the lobby, everyone looked surprised, and they looked like they revered him. Soul Master He? Shuatong was shocked too. There was passion burning in her eyes. Before she met Jian Wushuang, the only soul master that she had heard of and talked about was Soul Master He. The elderly with white hair and beard walked to the middle of the lobby. The man in the black robe immediately bowed and said, Soul Master He. This is the man who wanted to receive recognition for being a 3-starred soul master. 3-starred. The elderly with white hair and beard suddenly contracted his pupils. 3-starred soul master was a level that he himself had yet to reach. Greetings from I He Chong. I wonder what your name might be. Soul master acted rather humbly. Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang said lightly. Soul master He was stunned and realized that he had never before heard Jian Wushuang's name. My friend, 3-starred soul master is an extremely high existence on Tianling land. In White Sun Town, there was never anyone who possessed the power to receive recognition for 3-starred soul master. However, I can get in touch with the headquarters of Soul Master Hall for them to send someone over. But before I sent a message, I must know if you possess the qualification to sit for the 3-starred soul master examination. Soul Master, he said. This will do. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Then please reveal your consciousness, Soul Master, he said. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and activated his consciousness. Boundless soul power surged and formed into a purple tiger instantly, then charged out. Ha! Soul Master creased his eyebrows, and there was suddenly a buzz before him. A long spear that was formed by consciousness appeared from nowhere. Hong! A long spear hit the purple tiger directly. The two were stunned for a second before they collapsed one after another. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and erupted a terrifying soul constrain the very next moment. Rumble! The soul power covered Soul Master He like a thunderbolt. Soul Master He was like a lone boat in a storm, and he started shaking. Everyone in the lobby could feel the terrifying soul constrain from Jian Wushuang, and they revealed faces of terror. Humph! After emitting a low humph, Soul Master He grew pale. Jian Wushuang then reined in his soul constrain, and everything resumed tranquility. Such strong consciousness. Soul Master He let out a breath of relief, and turned to look at Jian Wushuang. Your consciousness is really fierce and much stronger than any ordinary 3-starred soul master. But, if I'm not mistaken, your usage of consciousness was rather inexperienced. Chapter 1383 Guest. Chapter 1383 Guest. Soul Master He was the most famous soul master in White Sun Town. having a lot of experience. When he battled with Jian Wushuang, he felt that Jian Wushuang was not familiar with consciousness control. And Jian Wushuang also admitted, I have always stayed in the mountains to cultivate by myself and seldom battled with others. So I am not quite proficient. Master, he smiled. Now I get it. You have already reached a level 3 soul master in terms of your consciousness strength. But to be honest, there is still a way to go to pass the test. Is it about the controlling technique of consciousness? Jian Wushuang asked. Master nodded. As far as I know, a qualified level 3 soul master not only needs powerful enough consciousness strength, but also proficient techniques to use. I think you can try not until you further improved them. Jian Wushuang understood. Others in the hall felt sorry for Jian Wushuang. He just lost his chance because of his lack of proficiency. What a shame. Proficiency is only about practicing, but he does have the potential. People were discussing. Master, he looked at Jian Wushuang. Now I have a suggestion. Tell me about it. Controlling consciousness proficiently needs practicing. In our Soul Master Temple, there are many excellent level 2 Soul Masters. So if you like, you can stay here as our guest and communicate or battle with Soul Masters. After you improve your skills by practicing, I will ask judges from the headquarters to give you a test, okay? Master, he said. Jian Wushuang nodded. Actually, he didn't care about the title, but the opportunity to practice. Though the Soul Master were not of level 3, they were good enough for Jian Wushuang to practice with. Okay, so from now on you are our guest, with the same status with me. Jian Wushuang accepted delightedly. By the way, I have brought a gifted girl with me. Could you please arrange someone to guide her? Jian Wushuang pointed at Xuetong. Xuetong's eyes were full of appreciation. Master, he looked at Xuetong and accepted the request. If she is talented enough, we will give her enough chances to unleash her potential. Thank you. Jian Wushuang smiled. Xuetong appreciated him a lot. Then Jian Wushuang stayed in the Soul Master Temple in the White Sun Town. Though masters there had even weaker soul strength than Jian Wushuang, they definitely outperformed him in terms of controlling consciousness. They are indeed excellent in understanding and controlling consciousness, Jian Wushuang exclaimed. On the contrary, divine generals here are just mediocre. Actually, Tianling Mystery Land was quite different from the eternal chaotic world. As was the cultivation mechanism. The most important difference was that there were no god tests in Tianling Mystery Land. So divine generals here solely made a breakthrough by cultivating, and by accumulating experience. Without the challenge of the god test, the divine generals here were far weaker than their equivalent in the eternal chaotic world. I have the 5 beast soul manipulation knack than few soul masters have here. What I need is the practice to unleash the potential power of the manipulation knack. That means I need to have battles with others. So soul masters here are good resources for me. So Jian Wushuang started to invite soul masters there with a challenge battle. In this way, he continued to improve the control skills of the manipulation knack. 30 years passed soon. In the Soul Master Temple, 2 soul masters were talking. Have you heard that Jian Wushuang defeated Soul Master Luoxian yesterday? Of course, they both used the soul power strength of a normal level 2 soul master. But Jian Wushuang obviously did a better job in using the skills. But 30 years ago, how to control consciousness was new to Jian Wushuang. He has made such a great breakthrough in a short span of time. Actually, Luoxian is still more proficient in controlling consciousness. But Jian Wushuang uses the skills in a more clever way, better than Luoxian's spirit-driven skill. Indeed, everyone was talking about Jian Wushuang's battle with Luoxian. In an independent secret room of the Soul Master Temple, Jian Wushuang was generating his soul power. He drove the power with his consciousness, transforming the soul power into a bird, a rabbit, and then a ferocious beast. Everything transformed was as if real. Transforming soul into animals. Now I know how to use the 5 beast soul manipulation knack. Chapter 1384. Examination. Chapter 1384. Examination. The 5 beast soul manipulation knack was the manipulation method of soul power. The method was segregated into 4 levels: beginner, initial success, great achievement, completely satisfactory. After Jian Wushuang obtained the method, he simply made the method known and came to wander around Tianling Mystery Land. At first, he was really unfamiliar with the method, and he couldn't put the power of the method to full play. It would even weaken his soul attack when he performed the method, so he might as well not put the method to play. However, in the 30 years that he stayed in the Soul Master Hall in White Sun Town, he had been fighting with the other Soul Masters and learned from one another. From continuous practice of the method, he had mastered the method better and better. At that point, he was finally at the beginner stage of the method. Although he was just a beginner, his soul attack had improved tremendously, especially regarding his method of attack. Previously it was monotonous, and it was purely killing off souls. Now there were many ways of soul attack. The current me, merely relying on soul power, should be able to fight face-to-face with an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven, and the possibility of winning is not low. I am just a beginner. If I were to train myself to the great achievement stage, I must continue to familiarize myself with the method and improve myself to the great achievement stage before the battle to fight for my position as a disciple of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang held his fists tight. My friend Wushuang. The voice came in from outside the secret room. Jian Wushuang changed his expression, and he immediately appeared outside the secret room. Soul Master He. Jian Wushuang revealed a smile and looked at Soul Master He before him. My friend, the people from the headquarters of Soul Master Hall has arrived, Soul Master He said. Oh. Jian Wushuang lifted his eyebrows. A month earlier, Soul Master He noticed Jian Wushuang's improvement in the method of using consciousness. He was barely reaching the requirement of a 3-starred Soul Master. Hence, Soul Master He sent a message to the headquarters of Soul Master Hall and told them to send an expert over for Jian Wushuang to sit for the examination for recognition as 3-starred Soul Master. Under the guidance of Soul Master He, Jian Wushuang came to the lobby of Soul Master Hall. In the middle of the lobby, there were 2 figures. The 2 of them looked rather cold, and the surrounding Soul Masters looked at them occasionally with faces of terror. 3-starred Soul Master? Jian Wushuang contracted his pupils. He already saw that the 2 of them were wearing robes with armbands that represented their identity as 3-starred Soul Masters. My friend Wushuang, let me introduce you. These 2 are Master Feng Tao and Master Huai from the headquarters, Soul Master He said. Greetings, Jian Wushuang bowed politely. You are Jian Wushuang. Feng Tao and Huai looked at Jian Wushuang. As for Soul Master He, they totally ignored him. Let's save the courtesy and go straight for the examination. The man in a flame-red robe, Feng Tao said. Sure, Jian Wushuang nodded. Feng Tao waved and took out a transparent crystal. This is a crystal especially for examining the consciousness strength of a 3-starred Soul Master. You give it a try. Feng Tao passed the crystal to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took it over. Then, he surged tremendous soul power into the crystal without hesitation. Along with the surge of soul power, the transparent crystal immediately gave out a brilliant dark purple light. Dark purple. Feng Tao and Huai were both surprised. Under a normal situation, as long as one could let the crystal give out purple light meant that he reached the level of consciousness strength of a 3-starred Soul Master. As for dark purple, it should be a peak 3-starred Soul Master's level. Peak 3-starred Soul Master? Feng Tao and Huai looked at Jian Wushuang with a different gaze. After all, although they were 3-starred Soul Masters, they were merely beginner level. They were far from a peak 3-starred Soul Master. Jian Wushuang was surprised himself. After all, his consciousness strength was actually only like an advanced 3-starred, that was very close to peak level, but yet to reach peak 3-starred. The reason why the crystal gave out dark purple brilliance was that Jian Wushuang's consciousness had already transformed into soul power. There shouldn't be any problem, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course there's no problem. Feng Tao and Huai immediately responded. Feng Tao replied humbly, your consciousness strength has reached the level of a peak 3-starred Soul Master. Theoretically, you could become a 3-starred soul master directly. However, according to the rules, you are required to show your manipulation method. How should I show it? Jian Wushuang asked. Very simple. Both of us will use a normal 3-starred soul master's consciousness strength to fight against each other. Then, Hua Yi and I will judge if you can become a 3-starred soul master, Feng Tao explained. That's simple. Jian Wushuang lifted his eyebrows. Let's start then. Let us go somewhere spacious, Feng Tao said. They immediately moved to the outside of Soul Master Hall, which was a boundless training field. Be careful, Feng Tao warned. Then he spread his fierce consciousness the very next moment. Virum. A humongous object that was formed by consciousness suddenly appeared in the universe. It was a green giant that was more than 10 meters tall. He was holding a mace in his hand. With mere consciousness, he formed such a huge green giant? A 3-starred soul master is different after all, Jian Wushuang complimented. Bang! The green giant stomped his foot, and the ground cracked and shattered while his figure turned into a huge green shadow and appeared before Jian Wushuang. Wow! There was a surge of green light. The mace in the green giant's hand descended with a strong force. Looking at the mace slamming down, Jian Wushuang didn't move an inch, but there was boundless soul power that surrounded him. Moo! An ancient and deep bellow reverberated. The soul power surrounding Jian Wushuang soared up and formed a huge black tortoise. The black tortoise wrapped around Jian Wushuang, and the extremely solid shell blocked the mace. Bang! A loud bang formed a terrifying breeze and swept over the area. The cultivators who were near to the battleground were swept by the strong breeze. The terrifying power was far stronger than the 2 3-starred divine generals' close combat. Although soul masters majored in consciousness, the items that derived from consciousness could explode in close combat with warriors and were similarly fierce. For instance, the green giant that was transformed from Feng Tao's consciousness, the wielded mace could be compared favorably with an advanced universe god in the third heaven. After a heavy collision, the green giant let out a loud groan, and he started waving the mace in his hand. Bang! 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 Every one of the continuous hits were heavy and forceful. The power hit the black tortoise shell, and the shell grew much dimmer, but had yet to shatter. Chapter 1385 Soul Island. Chapter 1385 Soul Island. My black tortoise's defense capability is strong and resilient. Jian Wushuang smiled. No matter how violent the attack was, Jian Wushuang's black tortoise stood still. Even when the tortoise was attacked and its halo became dimmer, it would soon recover with the flow of Jian Wushuang's soul power. Good defense. But Feng Tao continued to say, if you only keep defending without attacking, you can't pass the exam. Jian Wushuang smiled. Okay, I will. He soon shouted, Demonic Dragon. Boom! Right then, a giant ferocious dragon rushed into the battlefield as fast as a flash, roaring resoundingly as if it would shake the sky. Then it rushed to the green giant, caught him and bit its green throat. The green giant screeched and shivered. No matter how hard he tried, he failed to escape from the mouth of the demonic dragon. The demonic dragon was the craziest beast in the 5-beast soul manipulation knacks. The 5-beast soul manipulation knack was used to transform the great soul power into 5 exotic beasts. They were demonic dragon, purple tiger, crimson phoenix, black tortoise and divine ape. They were distinct from each other, and the demonic dragon was the most ferocious. Black tortoise was good at defense. At that moment, the green giant's neck was cut by the demonic dragon, so its head dissipated into nothing in the heaven. Seeing this, Feng Tao was shocked and his consciousness power exploded. Bang! 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 Another 3 green giants appeared in the battlefield, even bigger than the previous one. But Jian Wushuang wasn't nervous. You have 3 green giants, but I have 3 demonic dragons. Boom! He generated his power to transform into another 2 murderous dark-colored demonic dragons. Now it was 3 demonic dragons versus 3 green giants. They continued the fierce battle. At last, all the 3 giants dissipated, and only 1 demonic dragon was there. A very close competition. Feng Tao was exhausted and injured, He looked at Jian Wushuang and expressed his admiration. Excellent. Thank you. Jian Wushuang smiled. He had defeated Feng Tao. With the same consciousness strength as Feng Tao, Jian Wushuang had defeated him with the powerful 5-beast soul manipulation knack. Feng Tao asked Hui Yi, who was at the margin of the battlefield, "Have you recorded the battle?" "Yes, the whole process is recorded." "Good. We have done our jobs." Feng Tao smiled to Jian Wushuang. "We will take the recording back to the headquarters and submit it to our leaders. We will inform you of the result." "What a long procedure," Jian Wushuang frowned. "Or you can go together with us to save time." Feng Tao said, "Resources there are far better than here." Jian Wushuang felt excited. Now he still needed to improve his skills to control the 5-beast soul manipulation knack. But the limited number of soul masters in the White Sun town couldn't satisfy his need to practice. In the headquarters of the Soul Power Temple, things would be different. There would be top tribes and talents who Jian Wushuang could learn from. "Why not?" Jian Wushuang admitted. "When?" Feng Tao asked. "Right now." He only had to inform Soul Master He and leave a message to Xue Feng and Xue Tong. After finishing all of it, Jian Wushuang headed to the headquarters of the Soul Power Temple. The headquarters of the Soul Power Temple was called the Soul Island. It was a large island with many talents. In the Soul Island, there were also those as prestigious as real gods in the Tianling Mystery Land, though they were not as powerful as real gods in the lineage of Star. No Almighty had existed in the whole of Tianling Mystery Land. "Jian Wushuang, here are our headquarters." Feng Tao and Hui Yi took Jian Wushuang to the Soul Island. As soon as he arrived, Jian Wushuang soon felt a strong force. Consciousness attack. But soon, he realized that the consciousness attack was too weak, meaning it was nothing compared with even the Tian Yuan Mystery Land in the Snow Kingdom, let alone the Reset Palace. Moreover, Jian Wushuang could also feel the powerful breath from many talents. Feng Tao said, "The Soul Island was founded by the creator of our Soul Master Temple, real god Demonic Rain, who is also acknowledged as the most powerful master in the Tianling Mystery Land. The secret skill 18 Azura Hell that he created is still the most consciousness attack secret skill." Real god Demonic Rain? 18 Azura Hell? Jian Wushuang had no idea. It is also said that he has been to the world out of the Tianling Mystery Land. Feng Tao said. Jian Wushuang was surprised. So real god Demonic Rain had traveled in the eternal chaotic world? Chapter 1386, Peak 3-Starred Soul Master. Chapter 1386, Peak 3-Starred Soul Master. Jian Wushuang, I will send your examination result to the higher-ups. Wait for a while here, Feng Tao said. All right, Jian Wushuang nodded. Feng Tao and Hui Yi walked towards the huge, palatial buildings in the depth of Soul Island, while Jian Wushuang stood there waiting. In the lofty palace, there were 3 figures seated on 3 thrones. The 3 figures had a thick aura, and they were obviously experts at the real god level. Right in the middle of the palace, there was a mirror, and it was, of course, showing the process of Jian Wushuang sitting for the examination. Dark purple brilliance. His consciousness strength has reached a peak 3-starred. There's no doubt about it. Black tortoise? The defense power of the black tortoise is terrifying. The demonic dragon too. This is crazy. Even Feng Tao's green giant was defeated so easily. His usage of consciousness is not too shabby. Only a short while passed before the 3 real gods made a decision. Go ahead and pass him this armband. From today onwards, he is one of the members of Soul Master Hall. One of the real god threw an armband to Feng Tao. Feng Tao took it, and there was a flash of strange look. Then, Feng Tao and Hui Yi immediately left. Jian Wushuang, congratulations. Feng Tao and Hui Yi appeared before Jian Wushuang again. Then, Feng Tao passed the armband to Jian Wushuang. This is Peak 3-Starred Soul Master? Jian Wushuang was surprised. Your consciousness strength has reached the level of a Peak 3-Starred. Of course, you'll be a Peak 3-Starred Soul Master. Feng Tao smiled and revealed an envious expression. Although there were many Soul Masters on Soul Island, There aren't many who have reached the level peak 3-starred. Jian Wushuang kept quiet, but he didn't really care. Oh yeah, is it common for soul masters to fight against each other to learn from one another on Soul Island? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course, and it is rather common, Feng Tao smiled. Why? You want to fight against someone? I have been practicing in the mountains to improve my consciousness strength, but I have never once fought against someone. Now that I have the chance, of course, I'd like to learn from the other soul masters. Jian Wushuang smiled and replied. That is simple. There's a designated battleground on Soul Island. There are many soul masters that fight against each other there. Let me take you there. Feng Tao immediately brought Jian Wushuang to the battleground. Soul Island in a lofty palace. Bang! The door of a secret room suddenly opened, and a vicious youth, who was naked from the waist up and barefooted, walked out of the secret room slowly. There were servants who waited outside the secret room, moved forward to help the vicious youth with his robe. The seclusion this time took 1,800 years. It's been so long, the vicious youth smiled maliciously. However, although the time taken was longer, I finally performed that technique. If Mother were to know, she should be very happy. Master, you're dressed. The servant next to her spoke softly. The vicious youth looked at his robe, and then walked out from his palace. I have not stretched for 1,800 years. Let's go take a look at the battleground first. The vicious youth walked towards the battleground in Soul Island directly. Soon the vicious youth arrived at the battleground. He had just appeared, and there were many soul masters that noticed him in the battleground. Mr. Beishiu. Greetings, Mr. Beishiu. Many soul masters, including some 3-starred soul masters, bowed humbly at the vicious youth. Even the 2 real gods nearby looked at the vicious youth with good intentions. The vicious youth Beishiu had become the focus of the place quietly. However, he only glanced at everyone around him casually, and came to sit down in an inconspicuous place. His gaze was fixed on the battleground below. On the battleground, there were 4 of them fighting. It was 3 versus 1. Oh, Black Tortoise? Beishiu looked towards the youth in the crimson robe, who was covered by the huge black tortoise. The youth in the crimson robe was wearing an armband of a peak 3-starred soul master, and his aura was fierce. The people around him were 3 beginner 3-starred soul masters. At that very moment, the 3 of them were hemming him in with their all. They performed all kinds of consciousness attacks, such as a huge saber derived from consciousness, a huge cobra, and also a single-eyed giant. The black tortoise around the youth in the crimson robe didn't move an inch, but let the consciousness attack hit him. He wasn't affected at all. Not too shabby. Beishiu looked at the sight before him. Master Beishiu, this person is called Jian Wushuang. He just arrived at Soul Island yesterday. The moment he arrived, he chose to come to the battleground to fight. For days, he continuously fought 10 over battles. He wasn't defeated even once yet. Not long ago, even Master Jinong fought against him personally, but he didn't defeat him. A purple-dressed elderly, who was next to Beishiu, said. Jinong took action but he didn't defeat him? Beishiu raised his eyebrows. Jinong was a peak 3-starred soul master who was powerful. His power was about his level. Mainly because this boy's defense power was extremely strong. The black tortoise that he formed using his consciousness was unassailable. Although Master Jinong is much stronger than him in terms of attack, it was very difficult for him to break the black tortoise's defense. Then the battle was left unsettled, the purple-dressed elderly said. It turned out that he relied on the shell. Beishiu then loosened his tightly knitted eyebrows. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang stopped defending and took action directly in the battleground below. Crane cry. A huge crimson phoenix flapped its wing and swept out. A terrifying aura formed a blast that spread across. Crimson Phoenix? Beishiu lifted his eyebrows but remained unconcerned. However, after the Crimson Phoenix, there was another roar. Jian Wushuang used his soul power and transformed them into a few purple tigers. Purple tigers? Beishiu squinted his eyes. If it was merely Black Tortoise and Crimson Phoenix, he wouldn't care. But then, the appearance of Purple Tiger shocked him. Then, it was followed by Roar! There were 3 demonic dragons with murderous intentions that appeared on the battleground. Demonic dragon! The vicious youth, Bei Xiu, who was watching by the side of the battleground, suddenly stood up, and he looked extremely surprised. Black tortoise, crimson phoenix, purple tiger, demonic dragon. There's one left. The last one left. The very last one should be divine ape. There was an unprecedented brightness in Bei Xiu's eyes. He fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang on the battleground. He was looking forward to Jian Wushuang performing divine ape. It was a pity that even though the battle was extremely ferocious, he would never see Jian Wushuang perform divine ape. Unless it was because he wasn't powerful enough that he couldn't perform divine ape. That must be it. Black tortoise, crimson phoenix, purple tiger, demonic dragon. The 4 beasts are out, and the method is rather similar. Even if it were to be a coincidence, it shouldn't be that similar. 5 beasts soul manipulation knack. Mother talked about it before. She once saw the 5 beasts soul manipulation knack in the boundless universe. Chapter 1387 Bei Xiu. Chapter 1387, Bei Xiu. Why can he use 5 beasts soul manipulation knack? Bei Xiu was curious. Few talents here knows this knack. I want to meet this guy. Bei Xiu told his subordinate. Okay, I will arrange it. His subordinate in a purple robe said. On the battlefield, Jian Wushuang's battle with 3 level 3 soul masters had also came to the last phase. No matter how hard the 3 soul masters tried, they couldn't penetrate the black tortoise that Jian Wushuang wore. Instead, they got beaten severely by his demonic dragon. Jian Wushuang won. After the battle, Jian Wushuang chose to have a rest and recover his soul power. After over 10 battles, my soul power has been almost exhausted. Jian Wushuang thought. At that moment, the elder in a purple robe came to him. Master Jian Wushuang. As he was only a primary level 3 soul master, and Jian Wushuang was a peak 1, he should indeed called Wushuang master to show respect. You are? Jian Wushuang asked. I was asked by Master Bei Xiu to come here to invite you. He wants to meet you. Master Bei Xiu. He is at the top among all level 3 soul masters, only second to real gods. Even real gods have to respect him for his extraordinary background. Hui said. Yes, but he is sometimes too proud. Feng Tao seemed to dislike Bei Xiu. Whatever. I will go. Jian Wushuang smiled. Please follow me, the elder in a purple robe said. Soon they arrived at a brilliant palace. It was a golden palace, in which there were 2 luxurious tables. In front of a table sat a young man. At the center of the palaces, many beautiful ladies were dancing. Master Bei Xiu, this is Master Jian Wushuang. The elder in a purple robe told the young man. Then Bei Xiu welcomed Jian Wushuang smilingly. Brother Jian Wushuang? Hello. Just call me Bei Xiu. Brother Bei Xiu. Jian Wushuang said. Have a seat please. The Jian Wushuang sat in front of the other table face to face with Bei Xiu. I have watched your battle with other soul masters. I admire your power so much. Could I be friends with you? Bei Xiu lifted a cup of wine. Jian Wushuang had to accept such generosity. They drank several cups of wine. Then Bei Xiu asked all the subordinates and dancers to leave. Only he and Jian Wushuang were in the palace now. Jian Wushuang continued to drink and said nothing. He knew clearly that Bei Xiu's intention was more than making friends with him. Brother Wushuang, Bei Xiu started to say. I saw that in the battle you used a very powerful consciousness attack. I have a hobby of collecting those powerful tricks. Could you please show me that skill? Jian Wushuang was surprised. He didn't expect that Bei Xiu coveted his 5 beast soul manipulation knack. 5 beast soul manipulation knack was indeed extraordinary. Brother Bei Xiu, to be honest, my knack looks powerful but actually, its level is just mediocre. And what's more, I learned the knack from my master, who told me not to teach anyone, including my own son. So I think I have to refuse you. Jian Wushuang said. Don't hurry to refuse. Bei Xiu smiled and took out a token telling Jian Wushuang. I have a reward for you. This token is the well-known Feng Ling knack, one of the top 5 consciousness knacks in the Tianling Mystery Land. I think it's powerful enough for an exchange. Jian Wushuang took a glance without any interest. Being famous in the Tianling mystery land meant nothing to Jian Wushuang. Feng Lin Knack was only for controlling consciousness, but 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack was for controlling the soul, surpassing hundreds of Feng Lin Knacks combined. Jian Wushuang would accept only if he was foolish. When Jian Wushuang showed no interest, Bei Xiu took out another treasure. It was an ancient bronze mirror, looking shabby, but actually having extraordinary power. It's a high-level treasure for consciousness attack. Generally, it can double the power of users. I don't think you have one. That's true. Do you want to exchange these two things with me? You can be at the top of all level 3 soul masters with them. But Jian Wushuang remained indifferent. Thank you for your generosity, but I have to follow my teacher who taught me the knack. Jian Wushuang said indifferently. Chapter 1388, Huiyi's Request. Chapter 1388, Huiyi's Request. Bei Xiu's pupil contracted when Jian Wushuang rejected him once again. After a short silence, Bei Xiu spoke again. Wushuang, if I'm not mistaken, your consciousness attack technique originated extraordinarily, right? As I've said, the consciousness attack technique was passed down by my master. I wonder what you mean when you say that. Jian Wushuang lowered his voice. Shouldn't this technique be from out of Tianling land? Bei Xiu fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Outside of Tianling land? Jian Wushuang looked surprised. There's another land or world outside of this Tianling land. Bei Xiu creased his eyebrows when he saw Jian Wushuang's expression. This boy really doesn't know, or is he pretending? Bei Xiu wasn't sure himself. Bei Xiu, it's impossible for me to teach you the consciousness attack technique. If there's nothing else, I shall leave. Jian Wushuang didn't bother with Bei Xiu's response, but walked outside the palace. Watching Jian Wushuang left the palace, Bei Xiu's face grew grave. He rejected him even when I traded with my Feng Ling Knack in bronze mirror. Humph, so what if you rejected me? You think you don't trade, and I wouldn't be able to get the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack from you? That's funny. Just you wait. In no time, the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack will be in my hand. Bei Xiu held his fists tight as coldness spread in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, who had just left the palace, looked extremely solemn too. Bei Xiu recognized the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack, and knows that the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack is from out of Tianling land. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightly knitted. He never expected that. Tianling land was merely a mystery land that lineage of star controlled. Theoretically, the experts in Tianyuan mystery land and the eternal chaotic world shouldn't be in contact. Those impressive techniques or secret skills in eternal chaotic world, the experts in Tianling land shouldn't be able to recognize them. But in the end, Bei Xiu came to a realization. Luckily, he only noticed that my 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack came from Tianling land, but couldn't tell that I'm a cultivator from out of Tianling land. Plus, I am a peak 3-starred Soul Master of Soul Master Hall, and I'm on Soul Island. Even if Bei Xiu has a powerful background, he couldn't deal with me publicly. In other words, I am still in a safe situation as of now. Even so, I have to be extremely careful. Jian Wushuang was already extremely careful. Then, Jian Wushuang continued to stay on Soul Island. He cultivated on Soul Island, and he often headed over to the battleground to fight with other Soul Masters to learn from them. His 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack was merely beginner level. He had masses of room for improvement. Time flowed past like water. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang stayed on Soul Island for 260 years. In the 260 years, he spent all his time and effort on familiarizing himself with the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack. In those years, he fought countless times with a large number of Soul Masters. Along with the fights, he mastered the 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack even better. Until then, he was at the great achievement stage of 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat down as his eyes twinkled with brightness. Great achievement stage of 5 Beast Soul Manipulation Knack. My soul attack became fiercer, scarier. My overall power improved tremendously too. It's a pity that after so many years of cultivation, my soul power has yet to break through the bottleneck. Jian Wushuang felt regretful. His soul power had already reached the limit of an advanced universe god in the third heaven back, when he was in lineage of star. He had nearly leveled up to peak universe god in the third heaven. But it was a pity that the last step took him so long. If his soul power were to have a breakthrough again, his soul attack would improve tremendously. Jian Wushuang. The voice was from outside the secret room. Jian Wushuang was surprised, but immediately appeared outside the secret room. Feng Tao Hui, why did the two of you come? Jian Wushuang looked at the two of them outside the secret room. Although Jian Wushuang often fought with others to learn from them during his stay on Soul Island, he never had any friends. The closest ones were Feng Tao and Hui. We were looking for you, Feng Tao. What's happened? Jian Wushuang asked. Hui, you say it. Feng Tao looked at Hui. Well, Hui started explaining. I am having trouble in cultivation and I'll require a few desolate crystal for assistance. But desolate crystals, they are too precious. Although there are many soul masters who have desolate crystals, their asking price is too high. I can't afford it, so I can only go to the deserted region to hunt those beasts. Desolate crystals? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Jian Wushuang had stayed on Soul Island for such a long period, but he knew since long ago that the desolated crystal was Tianling crystal. It was merely a different name. Before he came to Tianling Mystery Land, Hall Master Yuan assigned him a task, which was for him to collect 10 Tianling crystals. You came to look for me, because you want me to go to the deserted region with you? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, Hui nodded. The deserted region is the most dangerous place in Tianling land. There are countless beasts in the region, and they are all very strong. If I were to go to the deserted region alone to hunt the beast, it would be rather unrealistic. So, I am asking you and Feng Tao, hoping both of you will go with me. Then, I would be more secure. Of course. I only want 2 pieces of desolated crystals that we get from hunting the beast. You can take the rest of them. If you are willing to help me, Hui won't turn you down if you need any help in the future. Even if you wanted me to go through a mountain of swords and a sea of flames. Jian Wushuang exchanged a glance with Feng Tao, and they smiled. I'm just going to the deserted region with you. You don't have to go through a mountain of swords and a sea of flames. Feng Tao smiled. Hui, when would you like to go? Jian Wushuang asked. The sooner the better, Hui said. Now then, Jian Wushuang smiled. Hui and Feng Tao were the closest friends he had in Soul Island. Jian Wushuang naturally wouldn't refuse keeping Hui company and making a trip to the deserted region. On top of that, even if Hui wasn't going, he would definitely need to head to the deserted region himself at some point. His task required him to go there after all. He had been practicing the 5-beast soul manipulation knack, and he didn't care about the task. However, when he was going to leave Tianling Mystery Land in the future, he was going to have to head to the deserted region to get the 10 Tianling crystals. If so, let's go now, Hui said. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao and Hui immediately left Soul Island and departed towards the deserted region. But just as Jian Wushuang took one step to leave, Mr. Bei Xiu was immediately notified. Chapter 1389 Deserted Region. Chapter 1389 Deserted Region. In a lofty palace, Bei Xiu, who was being entertained by a few beautiful concubines, revealed a shocked gaze. Finally, he is finally willing to leave Soul Island? Bei Xiu looked unusually cold. Jian Wushuang, I waited for you for so long. I thought you would stay on Soul Island for the rest of your life. Soul Island was the headquarters of Soul Master Temples. Although he had a strong background, it was best if he didn't take action against Jian Wushuang openly. But then, it was different if Jian Wushuang left Soul Island. If you're leaving, don't return for the rest of your life. There was murderous intention spreading across Bei Xiu's sight. The very next moment he left his palace. In a deserted region. A place that was publicly acknowledged to be very dangerous in Tianling land. Even the top gods in Tianling land didn't dare to let loose when they were to be in the deserted region. After all, there was a real god that had fallen in the deserted region. The deserted region was famous for its beasts. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao and Hui Yi had already arrived in the deserted region. However, from the beginning, they had merely wandered around the border of the deserted region, not daring to go in deep. It's a beast. Feng Tao turned to look and Jian Wushuang looked too. They immediately saw a unique-looking beast hiding among the bushes at the end of their sight. That is the beast. Jian Wushuang could feel the beast's aura, which was rather unique. It was obviously different from the beast on Tianling land and the eternal chaotic world. And that was the kind of beast that could nurture Tianling crystal. It's a pity that it is merely a rank 2 beast, Hui Yi shook his head. Jian Wushuang shrugged. He also knew that only when a beast reached rank 3 could it be compared favorably with a 3-starred soul master or a level 3 divine general, which was when they had successfully nurtured a desolate crystal. As for those below rank 3, the crystal would only be under the process. Even if they got it, there wouldn't be much point. Jian Wushuang's task was to get 10 desolate crystals. The desolate crystals, of course, had to be complete crystals. In other words, he had to find a way to kill 10 beasts that could compare favorably with 3-starred soul masters and level 3 divine generals. Look for them slowly. Although this is the border of the deserted region, there is still danger. We have to be careful, Feng Tao said. Jian Wushuang and Hui Yi both nodded. Then the three of them continued to go forward into the woods. After a few days, rumble! The green giant who was giving out a green gleam wielded his mace ferociously at the beast before him, which was more than 5 meters in size. The beast swung a punch and collided with the green giant's mace directly. Bang! There was a loud collision, and the green giant fell a few steps back. Die! Hui Yi roared, and suddenly he appeared behind the beast, and he was holding a purple spear in his hand. The spear was consolidated via consciousness and stabbed at the beast. Roar! The beast let out an earth-shattering bellow, and it turned and hit the green giant. The terrifying impact shattered the long spear, and Hui Yi's figure flew out altogether. But then, a demonic dragon with a soaring aura entangled the beast's body straight away. The demonic dragon had great power, and it squashed the beast with intensity. At the same time, its dragon claw seized the beast's back spine, while it chewed on the beast's skull. Kacha! Although the beast's defense power was strong, the demonic dragon's bite broke it into 2, and a large amount of blood and flesh splashed around. The beast's body shook and finally collapsed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Feng Tao and Hui Yi appeared before Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, you're the best. Hui Yi, and I can't do anything about it. Feng Tao looked at the dead body before him and laughed. Of course. Jian Wushuang is a peak 3-starred soul master. How could a beginner 3-starred soul master like us be comparable? Hui Yi said. Hui Yi, hurry and dig out the desolate crystal, Jian Wushuang said. Hui Yi beamed with joy. He immediately squatted down to dissect the beast. Very quickly, he picked up a shimmering emerald green crystal. A desolate crystal. This is a good one. Hui Yi held the emerald green crystal and smiled delightedly. This is only the first one. Look how happy you are. We have a peak 3-starred soul master like Jian Wushuang. So now we can have however many desolate crystal we want. Feng Tao laughed. I'm flattered. I can only deal with weaker level 3 beasts. If we were to come across some that were stronger, I wouldn't be able to do anything about it, Jian Wushuang said. Jian Wushuang, Feng Tao, I have a suggestion, Hui Yi suddenly said. Jian Wushuang and Feng Tao looked at Hui Yi. The deserted region is huge. Although it is only the border, it is still rather vast. Although there are many level 3 beasts around this area, it is not easy to find them. The 3 of us spent a few days finding just one, and that was considered lucky. If we were to be unlucky, we might not find one that we could deal with even in 10 days or half a month. So, I suggest that we part ways and look for the beasts. What do you think? Hui Yi said. Separately, Jian Wushuang was fine with the idea, but Feng Tao creased his eyebrows slightly. The possibility to find a level 3 beast, if we were to go in separate ways, is definitely greater. However, the probability to come across danger increases tremendously too. It's fine with Jian Wushuang, but if it were to be either one of us, we might lose our lives. Don't worry. As long as we are not too far away, and we keep in contact, once any of us is in danger, the other two can rush over for support. Hui smiled and explained. I'm fine with this. Feng Tao nodded in agreement. If they were not too far apart, they definitely could rush to one another in time with their traveling speed. Let's part ways then, Jian Wushuang smiled. The three of them immediately split up in the deserted region. Although they had separated, the three of them kept in touch at all times, so that they knew one another's rough location. Jian Wushuang continued to look for rank 3 beasts in the region. Only on the third day after they separated did Jian Wushuang find a rank 3 beast. The beast doesn't have a strong aura. It should have just turned into a rank 3 beast not long ago. It is much weaker compared to the one I killed earlier. I can deal with it alone. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and then took quick action. After a while, Jian Wushuang killed the beast directly. Then he picked up a desolate crystal from its dead body. Chapter 1390 Scheme. Chapter 1390 Scheme. The first Tianling crystal. Jian Wushuang looked at the emerald crystal in his hand and revealed a smile. Jian Wushuang, a Tianling crystal is a really good treasure. It is definitely helpful to improve your soul power. If it's possible, try to get more. King of Venomous Worms' voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. Just then, Jian Wushuang, quick save me. Jian Wushuang received an extremely urgent SOS message, and his face grew grave. It's Hui. He's asking for help. Jian Wushuang looked towards where Hui was. Hurry up. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang came to the rescue straight away. He immediately sent a message to Feng Tao on his way there, but Feng Tao didn't reply. What's going on? Feng Tao didn't reply at all? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. However, due to the urgency, he didn't have enough time to think much. He could only rush over with his fastest speed to where Hui was. Hui's location wasn't far from him. With his travel speed, he managed to reach him in a few breaths. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang's figure was stopped on the tree crown, but his gaze grew cold. Hui, what are you doing? Jian Wushuang looked forward, right at Hui who stood on the ground. When Hui saw Jian Wushuang's arrival, he put his hands behind him and stood there in silence with a malicious smile plastered on his face. He didn't even look in a fix, let alone in life danger. Jian Wushuang, don't blame me. Whatever that Master Bei Xiu is offering is too tempting. I can't reject him. Hui smiled. Master Bei Xiu? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Hehe, Jian Wushuang. At last we meet again. A vicious laugh was heard, then a figure slowly appeared before the thick forest. It was no other than Bei Xiu. The very moment Bei Xiu appeared, another two figures came from nowhere. They blocked Jian Wushuang's way, and Jian Wushuang could tell that they were both peak 3-starred soul masters from their armband. Even if Jian Wushuang was distracted, he immediately came back to reality with the sight before him. I'm trapped. It is a lie that he has trouble in cultivation. It is also a lie that he needs desolate crystals. His goal is to lead me to the deserted region and create an opportunity for Bei Xiu. Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold. Jian Wushuang, I guess not everyone is like you and can resist the temptation of Feng Ling Nak. Bei Xiu smiled viciously. He had used Feng Ling Nak to buy Hui over, hence the scene before his eyes. How about Feng Tao? Jian Wushuang stared at Hui. Don't worry. He naturally has someone to take care of him, Hui smiled. Jian Wushuang, instead of worrying about the other person, why not be worried for yourself? Bei Xiu sneered. Previously on Soul Island, I really couldn't do anything to you. But then in this deserted region, the deserted region is so dangerous. It is normal that a person or two die here. Oh. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and laughed. Aren't you scared that you couldn't get the manipulation method from me if you killed me? Of course I'm worried. So I don't intend to kill you. I only want to catch you alive. Only if I catch you alive will I be able to get whatever I want from your head. Bei Xiu smiled but didn't bother talking to Jian Wushuang further. Come on then. Virum. Virum. Two fierce consciousnesses exploded straightway. The two peak 3-starred soul masters that Bei Xiu hired had murderous intentions surging in their eyes. Then two giants formed by consciousness entirely appeared. The moment the giants appeared, they were covered in armor, boots and helmets. One of their hands held a sword, and the other held a shield. Boundless auras were emanating from the two giants. The way they used their consciousnesses is exactly the same. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Suddenly, the two giants that were giving out a soaring aura charged. Their speeds were as swift as lightning. Suddenly, they appeared before Jian Wushuang, and the swords that they were holding descended one after another. Rumble! Jian Wushuang's soul power suddenly surged, and it formed into a huge dark tortoise covering his body. Bang! Bang! The two giants' swords hit the black tortoise, and the brightness on the shell grew dim. The black tortoise shook crazily, as though it was going to collapse at any time. But in the end it resisted the attack. Humph! One of the peak 3-starred soul masters had deep ripples in his eyes, and there was suddenly an amazingly huge consciousness giant behind him. The giant was also wearing armor, but he wasn't holding sword and shield but a huge bow. Then the huge giant was already pulling on the bow. Buzz! Boundless power concentrated in the bowstring. Swoosh! A ray of flowing light suddenly exploded. The ray of flowing light went through the void, and appeared before Jian Wushuang. It hit the tortoise shell directly. Pust pust pust. The terrifying penetration power spread. At the same time, the two giants in armor wielded their swords and stroked. Jian Wushuang felt pressured. Ching ching. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted at the sound. The black tortoise covering his body was finally unable to withstand the consciousness giant's attack and shattered. The forceful power shook Jian Wushuang, and he was in a bind. Swoosh! There was another ray of flowing light again. The consciousness giant pulled his bow and shot another arrow. There was a glimpse of a glare in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and a fierce soul power erupted. Inextinguishable light! Jian Wushuang performed the secret skill of Tian Yuan. The secret skill of Tian Yuan was different from 5 Beast soul manipulation knack. The latter was merely a manipulation method of soul power. It was just a foundation. But the secret skill of Tian Yuan was the real secret skill of soul attack. It was definitely only focusing on soul constrain. Even the current him would find it easy to perform the technique. During his years in Soul Island, although he fought ferociously with many soul masters, he never once performed the technique. Until just then when he had put it to play directly. A bunch of lights condensed from soul power and shot out quietly. It seemed quiet and inconspicuous, but when the bunch of lights collided with the arrow that the consciousness giant shot, pust, it was as easy as breaking deadwood. The flowing light that was transformed from the arrow that the consciousness giant shot suddenly collapsed. The silent attack hit one of the peak 3-starred soul master opposites without lessening the force. Chapter 1391, The Strongest Technique. Chapter 1391, The Strongest Technique. Ah! The man in a crimson robe, who was struck by inextinguishable light, immediately shouted and his face distorted in agony. He held his head and his body shivered while the huge consciousness giant collapsed. Go! Jian Wushuang roared and his soul power surged. There were 4 demonic dragons that swept out immediately. They entangled the 2 consciousness giants and suppressed them. Rubbish! You are all peak 3-starred soul masters. 2 against 1, and the 2 of you are seized? Bei Xiu stood there as he watched the battle before him. He couldn't help but curse. He flipped his palm and a black, mysterious long spear appeared in his hand. Ah! Jian Wushuang noticed Bei Xiu take out a long spear, and his pupils contracted. He could tell that the long spear wasn't ordinary. It should be a treasure used for a consciousness attack. Jian Wushuang, you must be careful, King of Venomous Worms reminded. Jian Wushuang nodded and his face grew solemn. Go! Bei Xiu moved his wrist, and the long spear shot forward. Whoop! The black long spear let out a terrifying force and broke through the void before it with ease. Jian Wushuang saw that there was suddenly a huge black hole that had appeared from nowhere, while there was a faint light in the core of the black hole. Virum, vast soul power soared into the air, and Jian Wushuang formed a black tortoise shell on his body. The black tortoise let out a low bellow and blocked the black long spear. Bang! A loud bang, and the black tortoise that had just formed shattered into pieces. So powerful. Jian Wushuang was surprised. A powerful force erupted. Even though the force was resisted and weakened by the black tortoise, it could be compared favorably with an attack of an advanced universe god in the third heaven, an eternal chaotic world. Even with Jian Wushuang's divine body, dealing with such an impact immediately made him spit out a mouthful of blood and fly backwards like a bullet. He only managed to stand on his feet again after a while. His face had grown very pale. So strong! Jian Wushuang was surprised. He could tell that the power during the black long spear's peak could be compared favorably with a peak universe god in the third heavens. It was formed by consciousness entirely, a solid attack. Luckily, the black tortoise shell has weakened by more than half, and I have the blood-killing plate armor to protect my body. Otherwise, against the long spear, I definitely would die. Jian Wushuang was glad. Jian Wushuang, Beixiu is very strong. Stop concealing your power. Otherwise you'll die, King of Venomous Worms said in Jian Wushuang's head. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded. He saw that the two peak 3-starred soul masters that Beixiu brought had recovered, and they could totally join forces with Beixiu to fight against him altogether. Secret skill of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to hold back, but performed the secret skill of Star Palace, and the power spread across his whole body. I only have 10 breaths time. I can't delay. Make it quick. Jian Wushuang's face turned cold, and the very next moment, he rampaged towards where Beixiu was at, asking for death. Looking at Jian Wushuang's surprise attack, Beixiu smirked coolly. The black long spear in his hand had a layer of light, and it flew out again. Rumble. There was a huge black hole in the void again. There was madness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and there was an enormous amount of soul power soaring out from his sea of consciousness. Inextinguishable light. Swoosh. The silent light attacked again. The only difference was that Jian Wushuang performed the trick with the secret skill of Star Palace. With the support of the power of Star, the light's power suddenly increased tenfold. The power that Beixiu's long spear gave out was equal to an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven, while the inextinguishable light that I performed with my all, along with the support of the power of Star, shouldn't be any weaker than an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven. If they were to collide, they could definitely fight against one another. Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold and Blood Mountain Sword appeared from nowhere. Blood Mountain Sword. Ever since he entered Soul Master Temple, he kept the sword in Qianquan Ring. During the years in Soul Island, he always battles with his soul attack, but never once took out Blood Mountain Sword or used any sword technique. Naturally, no one knew that he was also a powerful warrior besides his identity of a soul master. Then, he was going to show his warrior power. Bang! A low, soft noise was heard. It wasn't loud, but the sound of large forces colliding came through. The entire battlefield drowned in a huge consciousness storm. It was a chaotic situation. Just then there was a swoosh in the consciousness storm. A figure flew out. Ah! Beixiu stiffened. He took my spear attack directly. Then Beixiu resumed normalcy. If so, let's see how you handle this. Beixiu smirked. This is the first time I have performed this trick after mastering it. You should feel honored. Then, there was a bright crimson light that shot out from Beixiu's eyes. The crimson light was just like a scarlet sun, extremely eye-catching. Jian Wushuang, who was charging towards him, couldn't help but lift his head to watch. The moment he lifted his head, there was a strange strength. Dreamland. Jian Wushuang immediately came to a realization. Then he smiled. It's such a joke that you're trying to pull me into Dreamland. Jian Wushuang wasn't affected at all, but continued to speed towards him. What? Beixiu was surprised. It was his biggest trump card. He had only mastered it after a long time. However, it didn't have any effect on Jian Wushuang when he put it to play. How is this possible? He didn't know that Jian Wushuang had already lit his soul fire. Plus, his soul power was extremely strong, and very close to a peak universe god in the third heavens. At times like this, dreamland and similar techniques like consciousness attacks had to be performed by a real god to have an effect on him. He wasn't afraid of dreamland at all. He was afraid of a solid attack that was consolidated through consciousness. Just like the long spear that Bei Xiu used earlier. Although it was played via consciousness, it was solid. Its power equaled an attack of a peak universe god in the third heaven that would be able to harm Jian Wushuang. Bei Xiu's strongest technique didn't have any effect on Jian Wushuang, and then he saw Jian Wushuang holding a sword. Sword. Warrior. Bei Xiu stared. Chapter 1392 Kill. Chapter 1392 Kill. Buzz. A cold sword light suddenly flashed. During his years in Tianling land, he had been practicing the manipulation method of consciousness. He had almost never used his sword before. His swordsmanship maintained its standard when he was in lineage of star. His creation stopped at beginner rank 3 unique skill. However, the beginner rank 3 unique skill was still rather scary to a 3-starred soul master. So fast. So furious. There was a flash of shock in Bei Xiu's eyes. There was suddenly an unprecedented danger that soared from the bottom of his heart. What a soul master feared the most was fighting in close combat with a warrior of the same rank, because they were not skilled with close combat. In a normal situation, a peak 3-starred soul master, who got approached by a beginner level 3 divine general, would likely be killed directly. But then, die! Jian Wushuang suddenly erupted his divine power, and the sword principle that he performed let out a shrill cry. Although Bei Xiu immediately formed a layer of consciousness blockage, a ray of sword light broke it like it was breaking dead wood at the very moment that the consciousness blockage was formed. The cold sword light continued to plunge towards Bei Xiu's skull. Shit! Bei Xiu's face suddenly changed. Jian Wushuang, stop. My mother is. Bei Xiu bellowed, but he had yet to finish his sentence. Psst! The cold sword light stabbed through his throat. Ai! Bei Xiu could barely move his mouth and his eyes grew dim. Jian Wushuang was filled with a murderous intention. Your mother? You're going to kill me. Why would I care about who your mother is? Jian Wushuang gripped his blood mountain sword in his hand tightly, and he looked towards Hua Yi and the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters nearby. Hua Yi and the other 2 peak 3-starred soul masters saw that Bei Xiu had been killed, and they were terrified. Hurry up and run! The 3 of them started running crazily without hesitation. There are still 6 breaths left. Kill all these people altogether. Jian Wushuang gave them a sharp glare. In the process of killing Bei Xiu, he had merely used 4 breaths of time. His secret skill of Star Palace was still sufficient to support 6 breaths of time. The 6 breaths of time was for killing the 3 people before him. He knew it'd be enough. Buzz! An enormous amount of blazing quicksand swept out and covered the entire universe. It covered Hua Yi and the other 2 people who were running in a craze. The effect of the quicksand took place, and their speed slowed down tremendously. Jian Wushuang first ran before the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters. Die! There was a murderous intention in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Without holding back, the moment the 2 people got closer to the secret skill of Tian Yuan, sword light spurted out. According to the strength of his soul power then, even if the secret skill of Tian Yuan wasn't supported by the power of Star, the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters found it hard to resist. With the support of the power of Star, the power of his secret skill increased by 10-fold. Ah! The 2 peak 3-starred soul masters gave out a blood-curdling scream. Then the sword light went through their bodies. After killing the 2 peak 3-starred soul master, Jian Wushuang moved and came behind Hua Yi. Jian Wushuang, no Mr. Wushuang, please let me live. Look at our past relationship, let me live. Hua Yi ran as he pleaded for mercy. Past relationship? Such a joke, Jian Wushuang sneered. Hua Yi had schemed against him for Feng Ling Nak. He hadn't taken their relationship into consideration at all. Then he brought up their relationship. Die! Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate, and swept out a ray of sword light. With the assistance of Blaze Quicksand, he killed Huyi directly. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang finally stopped, and the surrounding blaze quicksand dispersed. Everything resumed its tranquility. Phew! 10 breaths time just nice. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh. From the time when he had really fought and performed the secret skill of Star Palace, to when he had killed Bei Xiu, and the 2 peak 3-starred soul masters. Until he killed Huyi in the end, he had used 10 breaths of time. The moment the time was up, his power of star was exhausted. Huyi! Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold when he looked at Huyi's dead body. His palm quivered and his body shattered into pieces. Then Jian Wushuang came before Bei Xiu's dead body. Bei Xiu, peak 3-starred soul master. A big figure who has friends in high places in Soul Island. You could recognize 5B's soul manipulation knack, and knew it was hard to come by. It's a pity that you belittled me. Jian Wushuang sounded so cold. Bei Xiu really belittled him. Actually, with Bei Xiu's power, he could entirely fight Jian Wushuang face to face. He could even wait till Jian Wushuang's power of star ran out, then seize the chance to defeat him and kill him. However, from the very beginning, or to be exact, when Bei Xiu saw Jian Wushuang in Soul Island for the very first time, he had already belittled Jian Wushuang. He thought Jian Wushuang was just an ordinary peak 3-starred soul master, and he got the 5B soul manipulation knack by luck. He thought with his power alone, along with the 2 peak 3-starred soul master, he could easily win against Jian Wushuang. He didn't know that Jian Wushuang wasn't like other ordinary people, but an enduring genius who came from outside of Tianling land, and was directly under the command of the lineage of Star. Not only was he a soul master, he was also a terrifying warrior. In his hand, he held many trump cards. His consciousness had already transformed into soul power. Everything brought up Jian Wushuang's power, which was extremely fierce. However, for Bei Xiu he never thought of those, especially when he put his strongest technique to play. Jian Wushuang wasn't affected at all, and Bei Xiu was dumbfounded at the sight. Later on, when Jian Wushuang showed his warrior capabilities, it was totally beyond Bei Xiu's imagination. Although he reacted in the moment, he was slightly slow in the end, and Jian Wushuang had managed to succeed. However, Jian Wushuang understood that if he were to be an expert from the eternal chaotic world with the same ability, the possibility of him succeeding would be much smaller. Buzz! The same strength swept out and Bei Xiu's dead body was buried in oblivion. Jian Wushuang then took the Qian Kuan ring and long spear that Bei Lu left behind. Consciousness attack long spear. Jian Wushuang first looked at the long spear. The black long spear gave him a mysterious feeling, and his senses towards consciousness became stronger. Actually, Bei Xiu's consciousness attack wasn't strong. However, with the support of the long spear, it became terrifying. The long spear is definitely a treasure. Now it's in my hand. Jian Wushuang smiled. He wasn't in a hurry for the long spear to recognize him as an owner, but he looked at the Qian Kuan ring. Bei Xiu has a strong background in Soul Island. I believe his family background wasn't ordinary either. I wonder what other treasures are in his Qian Kuan ring, and whether I can use them. Chapter 1393 Leave. Chapter 1393 Leave. With a tinge of excitement, Jian Wushuang started to check the Qian Kuan ring that Bei Xiu had left behind. In his Qian Kuan ring, there were various treasures. Many were priceless. Jian Wushuang was astonished. I'm impressed. Although I am a disciple of Star Palace, forgetting the few unique treasures like Mountain River Map, Blood-Killing Plate Armor, Blood Mountain Sword, I can't compare to Bei Xiu. Jian Wushuang gasped in silence. Very soon, he was attracted by the 20 crystals in the Qian Kuan ring. Tianling crystal, so many of them. Jian Wushuang was astonished. One would only be able to get it by hunting beasts that were rank 3 and above in the deserted region. There was a total of 20 pieces of desolate crystal, which were extremely precious in Tianling land, in Bei Xiu's Qian Kuan ring. Jian Wushuang's disciple task was to only collect 10 Tianling crystals. Thus, he completed his task in this instance. He even had 10 extra Tianling crystals. We're both peak 3-starred soul masters, but it's totally different when one has background experience, and when one doesn't, Jian Wushuang sighed. He already inspected the other 2 peak 3-starred soul masters' Qiankuan ring. However, the treasures in the 2 rings didn't value 1/10 of Bei Xiu's. This is. Jian Wushuang was suddenly attracted by a wooden slip book that gave out unique energy in the Qiankuan ring. He could feel the uniqueness of the wooden slip book. I wonder what this wooden slip book contains. Jian Wushuang covered it with his soul power immediately. At the very next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were wide open. How could this be? Jian Wushuang was shocked by the contents of the wooden slip book. It was a secret skill. If it were to be any ordinary secret skill, or a secret skill that was famous in Tianling land, he wouldn't be shocked. Hence, he only reacted that way because the secret skill was 18 Azura Hell. It is the strongest consciousness attack secret skill, created by the top expert in Tianling land, Real God Demonic Rain. It was with Bei Xiu. Jian Wushuang stared in disbelief. He had heard Feng Tao mention the Real God Demonic Rain before. Real God Demonic Rain started Soul Master Temple, and at the same time, created Soul Island. Her existence on Tianling land was definitely godlike. The strongest secret skill, 18 Azura Hell, that she had created was extremely famous too. However, because Real God Demonic Rain was too aloof, many powerful real gods in Soul Island were not qualified to meet Real God Demonic Rain even once. As for the strongest consciousness attack secret skill, created by Real God Demonic Rain, almost no one had seen it before. But then, Jian Wushuang found the secret skill left in Bei Xiu's Qiankuan ring, and it was a complete one. Bei Xiu was famous in Soul Island, and everyone knew that he possessed a strong background, but no one knew what sort of background he had. He only knew that real gods in Soul Island were polite to him. Before he died, he spoke about his mother. Would his mother be Real God Demonic Rain? Then Jian Wushuang couldn't help but gasp. Actually, judging from the situation where Bei Xiu possessed 18 Azura Hell, his mother was most likely Real God Demonic Rain. No wonder he could recognize my 5-beast soul manipulation knack. Real God Demonic Rain has been outside of Tianling land, which meant that she had wandered in the eternal chaotic world before. With her power, she was naturally qualified to access 5-beast soul manipulation knack. Bei Xiu was his son, and it was normal that he found out about the 5-beast soul manipulation knack from her. Great, I killed the son of the top expert in Tianling land. Jian Wushuang sighed. Just then, Jian Wushuang, where are you? A message was transmitted. Jian Wushuang stiffened and took out a token. It was the communication token connected with Feng Tao. Feng Tao. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew that Hua Yi had framed him, and Feng Tao didn't know anything about it. When Bei Xiu was dealing with him, he had sent experts to take care of Feng Tao. Jian Wushuang stood there as he looked at the token in his hand. He sighed and suddenly exerted force in his palm. Pack! The communication token suddenly exploded. I killed Bei Xiu. Although there was no one who saw, if Real God Demonic Rain were to be angry and start to investigate, she might suspect me. Once I'm caught, I won't stand a chance. In other words, Soul Island or even Tianling land is not safe for me. Jian Wushuang knew his situation clearly. Hence, he didn't reply Feng Tao, and he even destroyed the communication token. What he was doing was making people think that Bei Xiu, Hua Yi and the rest of them had disappeared from the deserted region altogether. It would get the best result. He didn't belong in Tianling land. As there was no place for him anyway, he could just leave. I've been in Tianling Mystery Land for almost 300 years, it's time to return, Jian Wushuang smiled. He had come to Tianling Mystery Land for experience and train his soul attack. Then, he was at the stage of great achievement for 5-beast soul manipulation knack, and he had already reached his goal. Plus, he had already completed the task to collect 10 Tianling crystals. Hence, There was nothing left for him in Tianling Mystery Land. Jian Wushuang immediately tore the token for leaving Mystery Land. The token broke, and a space wormhole appeared before Jian Wushuang. Goodbye Tianling Land. Jian Wushuang chuckled. He took a leap into the wormhole without hesitation. When there was a flash of light again, Jian Wushuang arrived on the island that lineage of star control. There were still countless cultivators gathered there to wait for space wormhole to open. After Jian Wushuang had arrived on the island, he immediately returned to Lineage of Stars' old lair. In the resplendent Milky Way, there was Lineage of Stars' old lair. Jian Wushuang saw Hall Master Yuan. Young man, how did it go in Tianling Mystery Land? Plain sailing? Hall Master Yuan smiled and looked over. Quite well. Jian Wushuang smiled and he took out the 10 Tianling crystals. The task that Hall Master Yuan assigned me has been completed. Hall Master Yuan looked at the 10 Tianling crystals and nodded. These Tianling crystals are very useful, especially for consciousness and souls. You should keep them as you happen to need them. Jian Wushuang was touched, but he didn't reject. The Tianling crystals were really useful to him. Looking at you now, you have had a bountiful harvest during the years in Tianling Mystery Land, huh? Hall Master Yuan looked. Thinking about the gains made over the years, Jian Wushuang revealed a smile. Chapter 1394, On Tai Yuan Star. Chapter 1394, On Tai Yuan Star. He was in Tianling Mystery Land for almost 300 years. His gains were far beyond his expectations before. At first, he had only intended to improve his manipulation method of soul power, and his grasp of 5-beast soul manipulation, knack with the aid of a large number of soul masters in Tianling Mystery Land. He thought it would be good enough if he could achieve the initial success stage for the 5-beast soul manipulation knack. But then, he was at great achievement stage for 5-beast soul manipulation knack. On top of that, the battles with various soul masters allowed him to accumulate an abundance of experience. Besides, he had killed Bei Xiao and obtained the Black Long Spear and other treasures. Not forgetting his obtainment of the consciousness attack method, 18 Azura Hell. With all of that on hand, he had certainly gained a bounty. Oh yeah, Hall Palace Yuan. When I was wandering in Tianling Mystery Land, someone talked about the utmost expert in Tianling Mystery Land, Real God Demonic Rain. It was said that she left Tianling Mystery Land before to wander in the eternal chaotic world. Jian Wushuang suddenly said, yes, Real God Demonic Rain did wander around the eternal chaotic world before. Even within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, she gained fame. Her consciousness attack was extremely terrifying. Among the real gods who are good at consciousness attack in the eternal chaotic world, she is definitely in the top 5. Especially the 18 Azura Hell that she created. It's extremely impressive. In terms of her overall power, she is on the list of real gods. Although she was slightly lower than Lei Chao, her kind of power is extremely rare. Hall Palace Yuan explained. As expected, Jian Wushuang was impressed. The experts listed on the real gods list were a bunch of real gods that could carry out a massacre. No wonder Real God Demonic Rain had been treated so highly in Tianling Land. Real God Demonic Rain also knew that Tianling Mystery Land, where she was under the command of Lineage of Star. She didn't dare to resist. Hence, she once made a deal with Lineage of Star with her identity as an expert in Tianling Mystery Land. The context of the deal was that the disciples from Lineage of Star could enter Tianling Mystery Land for training. Regardless of any treasure that they obtained from Tianling Mystery Land, they can take care of them themselves. Similarly, if the disciples were to die in Tianling Mystery Land, we Lineage of Star couldn't blame the cultivators in Tianling Mystery Land, Hall Master Yuan said. Oh, I see. Jian Wushuang nodded quietly. Jian Wushuang didn't ask further. After having a simple understanding of Real God Demonic Rain, he returned to Sword Star. Sword Star. It's been almost 300 years since I last came back. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He couldn't help but crease his eyebrows after he returned to Sword Star. He was a disciple of Star Palace. On Sword Star, he had many maids and servants. However, It was extremely quiet on Sword Star then. When his soul power swept over the place, there was no one. What's going on? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows, then took out a communication token. Qiuyu. Mister, you came back from the mystery land? Qiuyu replied very quickly. I just got back. Jian Wushuang replied and immediately asked. Why, when I returned to Sword Star, is no one here? Where did all of you go? Mister, we are all on Taiyuan Star. Qiuyu replied. Taiyuan Star? Medicine Garden? What are you all going there? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Nothing. Mr. Bai Lipping needed some assistance and he asked for help. Qiuyu replied. He looked to you for help. Jian Wushuang found it weird. Wait for me there. I will come to Taiyuan Star now. Just as Jian Wushuang appeared on Taiyuan Star, he saw a bustling crowd in the huge medicine garden. The crowd was made of maids and servants under his command, including Qiuyu. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang appeared in the middle of the medicine garden directly. Qiuyu! Jian Wushuang's voice was heard. Master! Qiuyu walked over. Master! The maids and servants put down their tasks on hand and bowed politely at Jian Wushuang. You're all my people. Why didn't you stay on Sword Star? Why did you come here? Jian Wushuang looked cold. The maids and servants looked at each other, but no one dared to speak. Qiuyu looked like she was in a difficult position. What's going on exactly? Jian Wushuang looked towards Qiuyu. Before Qiuyu replied, there was a figure that plundered out from the void nearby. A bunch of dumbass, how dare you be so lazy? The raging reprimand could be heard before the person arrived. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes, and he looked at the incomer. The incomer was a bald elderly in a green shirt. The bald elderly had ferocious features. His eyes were cold. He appeared in the void before Jian Wushuang and the rest. He looked at them with a cold gaze. How dare you be lazy before me? It seems like I didn't punish you enough previously, and you couldn't remember it. The bald elderly said coldly, and took out a green long whip. The long whip was extremely flexible. It looked just like a living cobra. Looking at the bald elderly drawing the long whip, the surrounding maids and servants showed terror in their eyes. Jian Wushuang saw the scene, and his pupils contracted. Dumbass, you're really asking for a whipping. The bald elderly bellowed and swung his hand. The cobra-like green, long whip swept out and whipped at the maidservant nearest to him. The maidservant was merely a universe god in the first heaven. She had no power to resist the whip held by the bald elderly. She could only watch the long whip flying towards her body. Just as the long whip was about to reach the maidservant's body, buzz! A shapeless strength blocked the maidservants. That shapeless strength suddenly transformed into a 2-meter-tall giant. The giant swung his hand and grabbed the whip. No matter how forceful the bald elderly was, the long whip wouldn't move an inch. Formation with consciousness, according to Jian Wushuang's manipulation standard of soul power. He could use his soul power and transform them into any shape anytime. It only varied in the strength of its power. What? The bald elderly's face changed, and he finally noticed Jian Wushuang's existence. Jian Wushuang then looked extremely cold. Chapter 1395 Lesson. Chapter 1395 Lesson. When he was communicating with Qiuyu and found out that they were on Taiyuan Star, Jian Wushuang found it fishy. After all, Qiuyu and the others were their own servants. What they wanted to do was to serve him and help him to take care of Sword Star. Why would they need to work elsewhere? Then, looking at the sight before him, Jian Wushuang didn't need to ask and he understood. Young man, who are you? The bald elderly holding a green whip looked at Jian Wushuang as he squinted his eyes. Sword Star Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang spoke coldly. Jian Wushuang? Disciple of Star Palace? The bald elderly was shocked. Although he was a universe god in the third heaven, he wasn't the real disciple of Lineage of Star. In other words, he was just a servant in Lineage of Star. He didn't have any identity token, and hence he couldn't feel the aura of disciples of Star Palace on Jian Wushuang. He couldn't feel the token aura, but he had heard of Jian Wushuang's name. Even though they were in Lineage of Star, The ordinary disciples didn't bother with Jian Wushuang, however. He wasn't someone a servant could provoke and get involved with. I see. It's Mr. Jian Wushuang. I am Bai Liping, the bald elderly replied humbly. Bai Liping? You're the one who brought my people to Taiyuan Star? Jian Wushuang spoke in a low voice. This, Mr. Jian Wushuang, I think you misunderstood. I never forced them to work here. They came willingly. You can ask them if you do not believe me. The bald elderly Bai Liping smiled faintly. He wasn't worried that Qiuyu would tell him the truth because, as long as Qiuyu wasn't stupid, they would know that their owner couldn't possibly provoke his owner. Hence, they could only say that they did it willingly. Then the matter would be diminished, which was beneficial for both parties. However, if the truth were to be told, and even if Jian Wushuang had the heart to come forward on their behalf, he didn't have the power to. In the end, he would only be inviting trouble. Similarly, it wouldn't end well for them either. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and glanced at the people around him. He noticed that the maids and servants had lowered their heads. Even Qiuyu stopped before she spoke, and then lowered her head like everyone else. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised but glared at Bai Liping. He glared at the whip in his hand and said, Do you think I'm blind? The look like this, and you say that they did it willingly? Mr. Jian Wushuang. Bai Liping lifted his head and smiled faintly. I'm working for Mr. Xiaofeng. Mr. Xiaofeng is kind and generous. He knew that we servants have it tough, so he gave us time to cultivate respectively. However, as they were doing so, no one could take care of Taiyuan Star. As such, I asked the people in Sword Star for help. Mr. Xiaofeng did it out of empathy with us servants. We can't reject him. I think even Mr. Jian Wushuang wouldn't want to see Mr. Xiaofeng unhappy, right? Xiaofeng. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted. He had heard of Xiaofeng. He was also a universe god in the second heaven, and also a disciple of Star Palace. The only difference was that Xiaofeng had proved his identity with his power long ago, but Jian Wushuang. There was almost no one who recognized him to qualify his identity as disciples of Star Palace. So he gave an order for his own people to cultivate, but let the people under my command work for you. That's interesting. Jian Wushuang sneered at him, but his gaze turned cold the very next moment. Forget about the fact if it was Xiaofeng's order. Even if it was, we are both disciples of Star Palace. Without my consent, you force my people to work here on Taiyuan Star. Does he qualify to do so? Not only did you force my people to work for you, but you also hit my people. Humph. There was a sharp glare in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and his figure suddenly charged forward. Jian Wushuang appeared before Bai Liping directly, and the latter realized, and waited to come to blows. Rumble! A scary soul attack consolidated into a sharp thorn, and pierced through Bai Liping's sea of consciousness. Ah! Bai Liping let out a groan in pain. His eyes turned bloodshot, and his consciousness drowned in extreme pain. He lost the ability to fight back. Pack! Jian Wushuang's hand slapped Bai Liping's face, and Bai Liping flew off. At the same time, he grabbed the green whip from Bai Liping's hand. You dare to whip my people. Let me teach you a lesson today. A cold voice was heard from Jian Wushuang's mouth. He gripped the long whip and swung. The long whip became a soul snake, and whipped Bai Liping's body continuously. Pack! 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 The loud whipping sound could be heard clearly, accompanied by Bai Liping's roars and bellows. Bai Liping was a universe god in the third heaven. He wanted to counterattack with his all. However, as Jian Wushuang wielded the long whip, it naturally contained soul attack. Every whip brought Bai Liping into a sluggish situation. He couldn't dodge, nor he could match. He could only embrace every whip on him. In just a short while he was whipped by Jian Wushuang more than 100 times. From more than 100 lashes, Bai Liping's clothes were torn and his skin was worn. Some parts of his bone and flesh were mashed up too. He turned into raw flesh, and was extremely pathetic, but he was still alive. Show mercy, Mr. Jian Wushuang. Let me live. Bai Liping started pleading. He had no alternative, he had to ask for mercy. If he didn't, he reckoned he would have died from the whipping that Jian Wushuang gave. Humph! Jian Wushuang whipped Bai Liping's face once and finally stopped. Listen up. I do not care if it was your personal idea or Xiafeng's order. Let me keep this short, my people. Without my consent, cannot be ordered to do anything. Then Jian Wushuang threw the green whip away. He looked at the maids and servants who were shocked and said, Let's go back to Sword Star. Qiuyu and the rest came back to reality. Then, they immediately followed Jian Wushuang and left Bai Liping lying there half dead. Sword Star in the lofty palace. What happened during the time I wasn't here? Jian Wushuang sat on the throne overlooking at Qiuyu and the rest of the people. Qiuyu knelt down. Mr. Qiuyu didn't manage Sword Star well. If Mr. is angry, blame Qiuyu alone. I do not want to reprimand you. I just want to know what happened. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Tell me. Chapter 1396, 18 Azura Hell. Chapter 1396, 18 Azura Hell. Qiuyu hesitated and then said, Mr. You should know that lineage of star determines one's position through his or her ability. The same goes for the deacon elderlies on the highest level, as well as the disciples of Star Palace like yourself, and the ordinary disciples. The same also applies to us, the maidservants. Qiuyu briefly explained what happened. Then, Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze. You mean, at the very beginning, the one who was seeking trouble with you all was Luo Quan? Yes, it was him. Qiuyu nodded. Luo Quan has been an ordinary disciple all the time, and the ordinary disciples in lineage of Star didn't have any maidservants to serve them, nor could they occupy a star. Hence, not long after you went to the Mystery Land, Luo Quan came to Sword Star and said that he needed 2 maidservants to head over to take care of some matters on your behalf. I weighed my options, and then agreed as he only wanted 2 maidservants. Then, he came again and asked for 10 maidservants. I didn't agree and Luo Quan raised his fists. He brought along the other few ordinary disciples to take our people. We had no choice but to say your name. Who didn't imagine that Luo Quan wouldn't care? He even said that after the battle started your identity as a disciple of Star Palace, including this Sword Star, and we the maid and servants would all belong to him in no time. He was merely taking what would soon belong to him. Oh! There was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He sneered. Oh yeah, among all universe gods in the second heaven and lineage of Star, there are only 5 disciples of Star Palace including myself. That's because one of the disciples of Star Palace passed through God's test in the 3rd heaven, and became a universe god in the 3rd heaven. The quota for 5 disciples of Star Palace, beside myself, the other 4 already proved themselves with their capabilities. Their positions couldn't be shaken. Besides me, the one who was widely recognized as a person who wasn't up to standard. Back when I first came to Lineage of Star, Luo Kun defeated me before. Everyone thought I would become an ordinary disciple after the battle to fight for the quota, to become a disciple of Star Palace. On the other hand, Luo Quan is the strongest universe god in the 2nd heaven among the ordinary disciples. Naturally, my position as a disciple of Star Palace will be taken by him. Humph, nicely done. Jian Wushuang looked cold and he glared. Where is Luo Quan now? In the lineage of Star? No. Qiuyu shook her head. Luo Quan went to one of the mystery lands 200 years ago. Because he went to a mystery land, we returned to Sword Star. But it wasn't long until Bai Liping forced us to work on Tai Yuan Star. To Mystery Land? Jian Wushuang shook his head in silence and commanded. Qiuyu, I won't be on Sword Star for some time. When I'm not here, try not to leave Sword Star. When people come asking for trouble, if it isn't too ridiculous, hold back if you could. Wait till the battle ends, and we will take care of it. Yes, Qiuyu nodded politely. All right, you're dismissed. Jian Wushuang waved and Qiuyu left with the other maids and servants. In the hall, Jian Wushuang sat alone. Qiuyu even apologized to me and said that it was all her fault. In actual fact, I was the main reason that all of this happened. Jian Wushuang laughed at himself. The real reason why the maids and servants were bullied was actually because of him as an owner. If the owner were to be powerful, and those disciples revered him, Naturally, no one would dare to seek trouble with them. But the crucial point was that the disciples in lineage of Star, including the ordinary disciples, didn't look up to him. Naturally, they looked down upon his maids and servants. To make people afraid of acting impetuously, he could only rely on his power. The battle is a platform to showcase my power. Only by defeating those ordinary disciples like Luo Quan and Chu Yang during the fight, or even defeating the other 4 disciples of Star Palace, will the people of lineage of Star recognize my identity as a disciple of Star Palace. Battle. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists tightly. This battle was extremely meaningful to him. Then, Jian Wushuang didn't opt to wander in another mystery land, nor did he go to cultivation places like Reset Palace or Shrine of Myriad Swords. He stayed back in Sword Star and started cultivating in seclusion. Jian Wushuang only had one goal to cultivate in seclusion, which was to obtain the secret skill of consciousness attack from Baixiu. 18 Azura Hell. 18 Azura Hell was the expert on the Real Gods list, and the user of Real God Demonic Rain's strongest technique. Even Hall Palace Yuan was impressed with her technique. Of course, Jian Wushuang was dying to master the technique. 18 Azura Hell was a Phantasmagoria secret skill. 18 Azura Hell is segregated into 18 levels of dreamlands. Jian Wushuang was shocked. But at the same time, he understood that when he was fighting with Baixiu, the strongest technique that he had pulled, in the end, was this. However, Baixiu had just mastered the technique, and he had merely performed the first 3 levels. Most importantly, the 3 dreamlands performed with Baixiu's consciousness was nothing to Jian Wushuang, who had already lit up soul power. However, if the same technique were to be performed by Jian Wushuang, who had lit his soul power, it would be several times scarier. Of course, Jian Wushuang had to first grasp the technique. 18 levels of dreamlands, the first 3 levels are barely beginner level. During the first 6 levels, one will still be at the initial success stage. Then, the 12th level would be the great achievement stage. Finally, the 18th level would be considered as the complete satisfactory level. Baixiu was only at the beginner stage of the secret skill? Jian Wushuang sneered, but quickly began understanding the secret skill with his full concentration. 18 level of dreamlands. He wanted to grasp level by level and try to perform them. First, he must understand that the first level of the 18 levels of Dreamland was Hell of Tongue Removal. That level of Dreamland was the easiest. Plus, Jian Wushuang had already lit up his soul power. It was much easier to understand. Even so, he spent a total of 5 years. 5 years to understand the first level? Jian Wushuang was not satisfied, but he had no choice as he had tried his best. However, if the dead Baixiu were to know about it, he would definitely be jealous and go mad. After all, the moment he got the secret skill from his mother, he had been trying to understand. Just for the first level of understanding, he had spent 150 years. On the second level of Dreamland, he had used a total of 600 years. The third level of Dreamland was the longest. He had spent a total of 1,800 years. However, Jian Wushuang grasped the first level in 5 years, and he was still complaining that it was too slow. Chapter 1397, Longgang Mystery Land. Chapter 1397, Longgang Mystery Land. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang cultivated in seclusion for 310 years. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang's eyes shot open, and there was a flash of crimson light that erupted. The crimson light was red like a scarlet star, and extremely eye-catching. Back when Baixiu had performed the trick, his eyes had turned into the scarlet sun as well. However, the color wasn't as significant as Jian Wushuang's. After 310 years in seclusion, I'm finally at the initial success stage for 18 Azura Hell. Jian Wushuang smiled. The initial success stage for 18 Azura Hell meant that Jian Wushuang could get through the first 6 levels of Dreamland. 310 years to master the first 6 levels. One must know that Baixiu took almost 3,000 years to just master the first 3 levels. 18 Azura Hell 18 levels of Dreamland. The higher the level, the more difficult it was to master. Although I have mastered the first 6 levels, it will still take more than 100 years for me to understand the 7th level. However, it is less than 100 years until the battle. Jian Wushuang smiled, but didn't intend to continue to cultivate in seclusion. After all, merely the first 6 levels were already terrifying enough. Jian Wushuang, the secret skill that you obtained, although it was only a consciousness attack and not a soul attack, it is still powerful, and it increases your fighting power tremendously. If you were to perform this trick during the fight, one whose consciousness strength hasn't reached the level of a peak universe god in the 3rd heaven could barely resist it, King of Venomous Worms said. That should be right. However, even if one can withstand it, if they can't shake off the phantasmagoria, the ending will be the same, Jian Wushuang smiled. The scary thing about Dreamland was that not only would one drown in phantasmagoria, but also when one tried was busy trying to shake off the phantasmagoria, Jian Wushuang could still take action and kill the person. Hence, not only did the person have to resist Dreamland, but he also had to shake off the phantasmagoria quickly in order to dodge Jian Wushuang's sword attack. With this technique, you can fight calmly in the upcoming battle. You also have the confidence to maintain your identity as a disciple of Star Palace. King of Venomous Worms laughed. I'm confident, not definite. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Eternal Chaotic World was very different from Tianling Land. In Tianling Land, he could kill a 3-starred Soul Master, who was comparable to a peak level 3 Divine General. However, in Eternal Chaotic World, he could merely match evenly with an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven with consciousness attacks. It was hard to say if he could match evenly with a peak universe god in the 3rd heaven. His soul strength was merely at the level of an advanced universe god in the 3rd heaven after all. Jian Wushuang, what do you plan to do next? King of Venomous Worms asked. There's less than 100 years' time. I will still figure out ways to improve my power during this period. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist. The mystery lands under Lineage of Stars control. I only went to the least dangerous Tianling mystery land. There are 3 other mystery lands that I have yet to visit. There will be many opportunities in the 3 mystery lands, and the training effect will be more significant. With the remaining time, I'll select one of the mystery lands. Jian Wushuang made his decision, and immediately went to see Hall Master Yuan. When Hall Master Yuan found out that Jian Wushuang wanted to depart to another mystery land, he wasn't shocked, and he assigned another Star Palace disciple task for Jian Wushuang, just like the last time. Very soon, Jian Wushuang left for the mystery land. One of the 4 mystery lands that Lineage of Star controlled, Longgang Mystery Land. Longgang Mystery Land's danger level was in the 2nd place among the 4 mystery lands. There were massacres all over. There were countless cultivators and ferocious beasts. The cultivators and ferocious beasts were born enemies. The 2 tribes had extremely unique ways of improving their power. Human cultivators improved their power by taking in the ferocious beast's soul nuclei, while the ferocious beasts consume human lives to increase their level. Under such prerequisites, it was only right and proper that the 2 tribes killed one another. After Jian Wushuang had arrived at Longgang Mystery Land, he soon became one of the members of the group of human adventurers. He followed a hunting troop and barged into the ferocious beast's land. Then they started their hunting trip. Of course, Jian Wushuang hunted ferocious beasts only for training and to complete his Star Palace disciple task, while the others in the troop were aiming for the ferocious beast's soul nuclei for improving their powers. The mad massacre was ongoing. Jian Wushuang worked hard to improve his swordsmanship with the training. As for his soul power, after he had arrived in Longgang Mystery Land, unless he was in a life-threatening situation, he wouldn't use his soul attack. He didn't even practice the 5-beast soul manipulation knack. He let his soul power maintain itself in a totally relaxed state. Yes, he wanted his soul power to be in a relaxed state. He didn't cultivate to improve it or perform any attack with soul power. He did not stimulate his soul power in any way. 90 years passed in such relaxed state. After 90 years, on a remote mountain, Jian Wushuang sat alone. It's about time. I should leave. That day, Jian Wushuang had decided to leave Longgang Mystery Land and return to Lineage of Star. After he had returned to Lineage of Star and passed down the task that Hall Master Yuan assigned to him, he came to Star Tower. I was in Longgang Mystery Land for 90 years. My swordsmanship and close combat skills improved tremendously. I wonder how far am I from the second floor of Star Tower. Jian Wushuang stepped foot into Star Tower excitedly. On the second floor of Star Tower, Jian Wushuang was fighting against the cold-looking middle-aged man again. Just like the first floor, the cold-looking middle-aged man held his sword and performed an advanced rank 3 unique skill. However, the same advanced rank 3 unique skill, but the power was a few folds stronger than the first floor. His combat technique and experience was far beyond the first floor too. When Jian Wushuang passed through the first floor back then, he had pulled a lot of tricks. But then, he had become more powerful and came to challenge the second floor again. He fought with the cold-looking middle-aged man for a longer time frame, but, in the end, with a flick of the wrist, the cold-looking middle-aged man moved the shapeless universe, and the sword light hit Jian Wushuang's chest. Jian Wushuang was defeated again. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised by the result. Star Tower, every floor is a huge step forward. I barely passed through the first level back then. Although my swordsmanship and killing technique improved, I was far from passing through the second floor. I would still need time to cultivate, Jian Wushuang thought. But he wasn't demotivated. After all, he had improved significantly compared to when he had first come to Lineage of Star. Then Jian Wushuang came to the illusionary mind sea. Chapter 1398, Challenging Illusionary Mind Sea. Chapter 1398, Challenging Illusionary Mind Sea. Illusionary Mind Sea was a training ground that could be tied with Star Tower in Lineage of Star. The difference was that Star Tower focused on unique skill and killing techniques, while Illusionary Mind Sea focused on consciousness. Jian Wushuang stayed in the Lineage of Star for so many years. He had been to Star Tower many times, but it was his first visit to the Illusionary Mind Sea. There was a total of 30 floors in Illusionary Mind Sea. On the first floor, Jian Wushuang saw a boundless crimson ocean. In the Crimson Ocean, there was an enormous amount of scarlet sea water raging with anger. There was a unique force flowing over from all directions simultaneously. When I was in Longgang Mystery Land, I let my soul power remain at its most relaxed state, so that I could be at ease entirely. Illusionary Mind Sea could let my soul power tense up again. The looseness and the tension is the only chance for me to break through the bottleneck. 30 floors of Illusionary Mind Sea. Let's see how far I can go. There were shocking lights surging in Jian Wushuang's eyes. His figure sped off like lightning and ignored the phantasmagoria on the first floor, but came before the second Crimson Ocean, which was the second floor of Illusionary Mind Sea. The phantasmagoria swept towards him from all directions. Phantasmagoria of such a level won't affect me at all. Jian Wushuang's footsteps didn't slow down at all, but he continuously passed through the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. He didn't even slow down when he got to the 10th floor. At the 13th floor, Jian Wushuang finally slowed down slightly. However, he was still rather fast. He also passed through the 13th and 14th floor easily. On the 15th floor, he paused for a while but continued to pass through. On the 16th floor, it was extremely pressuring for him. He put in all his effort and bellowed madly. He then finally shook off the phantasmagoria. The 17th floor. This is? Jian Wushuang looked at his surrounding. Rumble. The terrifying rumble reverberated in the entire battlefield. The extremely huge fortress shattered entirely, and there were dead bodies all over. A large number of experts were on a rampage. Haha, kill everyone in this realm. Merely a green fire world. How dare you dream of occupying such a treasure? You're asking for it. Don't let anyone go. A large number of universe gods, real gods, even Almighty were rampaging across the battlefield. They were killing all the cultivators of Green Fire World. The entire Green Fire World shattered. Shit, my Green Fire World is doomed. No! Pathetic groans and wails were heard from every corner. Jian Wushuang was in the middle of the battlefield. Jian Wushuang. Emperor Tang ran before Jian Wushuang with his hair in disarray. He shouted with rage. You brought a bunch of experts to Green Fire World? You betrayer! Jian Wushuang, it's your fault. You attracted all these experts here. Our Green Fire World was destroyed because of you. Jian Wushuang, you're the one to blame for what happened to Green Fire World. Countless roars reverberated in the universe. Jian Wushuang clenched tightly. Phantasmagoria. This is fake. No matter how realistic the scene is, fake will always be fake. It's merely phantasmagoria. Don't think of affecting me. Break. Jian Wushuang flushed and his face was distorted in agony. He looked terrifyingly ferocious, and his eyes were twinkling with unprecedented madness. In his sea of consciousness, his lit soul power started vibrated crazily. Under such madness, the soul power in his sea of consciousness also vibrated vigorously. The surrounding images started quivering vigorously, and trembling in the balance too. Just a little bit more, just slightly more. Break! Break! Jian Wushuang bellowed. His fingertips dug deep into his flesh, and he started bleeding. Suddenly, rumble! His sea of consciousness quivered and Jian Wushuang suddenly trembled. The surrounding images collapsed entirely. On the 17th floor of Illusionary Mind Sea, on the billowing crimson ocean, Jian Wushuang stood. His body was covered with sweat, and he was panting with his head hung low. He looked like he was having a fit. However, even so, there was happiness in Jian Wushuang's eyes. I broke through. I really broke through. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists, and his entire body shivered in excitement. 90 years ago, he had seen that the strength of his soul power remained on the level of an advanced universe god in the third heaven and couldn't break through. And he had been thinking of a way. For 90 years in Longgang Mystery Land, he had intentionally let his soul power remain at its most relaxed state, and he had never once triggered his soul power. 9 years of relaxation, and he had came to Illusionary Mind Sea right before the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace. Then utilized the Phantasmagoria in Illusionary Mind Sea to stimulate his soul power, that was relaxing all this while so that his soul power would suddenly tense up. Such strong stimulation after relaxation, there was a possibility that his soul power would break through. Jian Wushuang was merely making an attempt. Who knew it would really work? The strength of his soul power had already broken through, and he had reached the level of peak universe god in the third heaven. His ability was enhanced tremendously with the breakthrough. Jian Wushuang, you have guts. Although your soul power might break through under such strong stimulation, it could also severely damage your soul, or even affect your soul fire. Fortunately, you're lucky and you broke through. Otherwise, King of Venomous Worms' voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang was glad. King of Venomous Worms knew what he thought, and he told him about the risks. He was really lucky. Regardless, it's the best to be able to break through the bottleneck of soul power before the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and he was overjoyed. Then, Jian Wushuang naturally continued to the 18th floor of the Illusionary Mind Sea. As he had just broken through on the 17th floor, his endurance for Phantasmagoria was naturally stronger. The 18th floor couldn't threaten him. He passed through the 18th floor. As for the 19th floor, he passed through it. But on the 20th floor, Jian Wushuang reckoned the strength of Phantasmagoria would affect any ordinary real god too. He naturally couldn't resist it. In the end, he stopped at the 20th floor. In the depth of Illusionary Sea Mind, on the hillock at the border of the 30th Sea region, there was an elegant elderly with crimson long hair seated. The elegant elderly was a deacon elderly, who was in charge of taking care of the Illusionary Mind Sea. The elegant elderly who was originally drinking alone suddenly raised his head, and looked into the distance with his lightning-like eyes. Chapter 1399, The Battle Began. Chapter 1399, The battle began. The 19th floor? The elegant elderly looked shocked. There was a total of 30 floors in illusionary mind sea. From the 20th floor onwards, only consciousness strength at a real god's level could pass through. However, as he had passed through the 19th floor, it meant that his consciousness strength was at the peak of a universe god's. If the person who had passed the 19th floor was a disciple, who was a universe god in the third heaven in lineage of star, the elegant elderly wouldn't have been surprised. However, Jian Wushuang was obviously just a universe god in the second heaven according to his aura. A universe god in the second heaven passed through the 19th floor. Such a terrifying consciousness. The elegant elderly complimented in silence. It's been a while since there was a person with impressive consciousness like this young man in lineage of star. I have to report to Hall Master Yuan immediately. The elegant elderly immediately sent a message to Hall Master Yuan. Hall Master Yuan, who received the message, showed an interested expression. Jian Wushuang. Although he is an inverse cultivator, he is merely a universe god in the first heaven. His soul power strength has reached such a level. TSK. It seems that the battle to fight to be a disciple of Star Palace will be very interesting. At Lineage of Star, the battle to be a disciple of Star Palace that happens every 5,000 years is finally here. On that day, the entire lineage of Star was boiling with excitement. In the middle of the boundless Milky Way, there was a floating star. The star was named Titanic Star. Although Titanic Star was said to be a star, it was actually an empty land that was floating. The land was the battle ring itself. At that very moment, a large number of spectators from lineage of stars surrounded Titanic Star. The crowd was crazily huge. These people were made of higher-ups in lineage star, disciples who were universe gods in the first to third heaven. At the same time, there were maids and servants who had gathered there too. No one wanted to miss the battle that happened every 5,000 years. Jian Wushuang also appeared at the border of Titanic Star. Once he had appeared, he could feel a few burning gazes. Jian Wushuang looked, and he suddenly understood. The few owners of those burning gazes were all ordinary disciples, who were universe gods in the second heaven, and they hoped to fight for the quota, to be a disciple of Star Palace during this battle. Among them, the one who had the best chance was Luo Quan. They are eyeing me. I guess they are dying to get my quota to be a disciple of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Then he closed his eyes. After all of the disciples gathered around Titanic Stars. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. A dozen figures descended simultaneously. The one leading was of course Hall Master Yuan. The one next to Hall Master Yuan was Lei Chao. They were followed by a dozen deacon elderlies. It's about time. Let's begin. Begin from universe gods in the first heaven, Hall Master Yuan ordered. The disciples who were universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of star, then appeared on Titanic Star. There were a total of about 40 people. There are quite a number of them. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and took a look at the Titanic Star. Jian Wushuang, you were supposed to be among these people, King of Venomous Worms said. Me? Jian Wushuang smiled. In terms of realm, he was merely a universe god in the first heaven. It wasn't because he wanted to hide his identity as an inverse cultivator. He was really supposed to join the battle as a universe god in the first heaven. It was a pity that inverse cultivation was a piece of important news, and it couldn't be exposed easily. Hence, Jian Wushuang could only pretend to be a universe god in the second heaven. Naturally, he had to join the battle among universe god in the second heaven. After those disciples who were universe gods in the first heaven appeared on Titanic Star, there was immediately a space wormhole which popped up. Then, Hall Master Yuan spoke. Just like the battle 5,000 years ago, the rotation battle is carried out in 2 rounds. In the first round, everyone takes turn to challenge in the Supreme Tower. Depending on your performance in the Supreme Tower, the Deacon Elderlies and I will watch. We will then pick the top 10 to participate in the second round of the rotation battle, after everyone has passed through the Supreme Tower. Let's begin. The rules of the battle were the same as before. The disciples understood, and they didn't have any questions. Very quickly, universe gods in the first heaven passed through the wormhole, one after another, to enter the supreme tower. The process took over an hour, as there were 40 geniuses who had to go through the supreme tower one by one. After that, Hall Master Yuan announced the result straightway. Duan Tianhong, Yu Jiang, Qiu Yu. Hall Master Yuan read 10 names. The 10 of you can proceed to the second round of rotation battle. Once the result was announced, those whose name was read were delighted, while those whose name weren't read were disappointed. The 10 of you are the top 10 who stayed in the supreme tower for the longest. Jian Wushuang watched the scene calmly. He knew that although it was decided by Hall Master Yuan and those deacon elderlies, in a normal situation, the duration that one stayed in the supreme tower would reveal the result. Of course, it was not definite. The rotation battle's rules were even simpler. The 10 geniuses fought one-on-one. Everyone would fight a battle with another person. In other words, everyone would fight 9 battles, and the ranking would be decided according to the winning and losing of the battles. The first 5 would be disciples of Star Palace. Every battle would be entitled to extra grants. The higher the ranking, the more one received. The rotation battle began, and the 10 geniuses took turns to fight with the other 9 disciples. As the rotation battles were carried out on Titanic Star, the surrounding spectators were naturally noisier than the first round, which was carried out in the Supreme Tower. Especially when the fight was between 2 geniuses that were evenly matched. The crowd would cheer when the fight was ferocious. Jian Wushuang watched the rotation battle calmly. In his body, King of Venomous Worms laughed creepily. Jian Wushuang, are you upset? Do you feel aggravated? If you were to join the battle as a universe god in the first heaven, there would be no suspense, and you could easily win. But now you can only watch. Even if I join the battle as a universe god in the second heaven, it doesn't mean that I can't win. What's there to be upset about? Jian Wushuang didn't care. It's great that you have such an attitude. You must aim high. To fight with these universe gods in the first heaven, you wouldn't feel pressure at all. If you were to win the first place among universe god in the second heaven, when you are only a universe god in the first heaven, that's truly impressive. King of Venomous Worms said. First, Jian Wushuang contracted his pupils, but didn't say much. The battle speed among universe gods in the first heaven was rather fast. In 2 hours, the 10 universe gods in the first heaven had completed 9 fights each. Chapter 1400 Ling Fei Bai. Chapter 1400 Ling Fei Bai. Everyone watched the rotation battles. The genius named Duan Tianhong won all 9 battles. He naturally became the first among universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of Star. He and the other 4 disciples among the top 5 became disciples of Star Palace. The battle among universe gods in the first heaven in lineage of Star ended then. There was discussion in the surroundings of Titanic Star. Duan Tianhong is strong as usual. He got his quota to be a disciple of Star Palace, winning first place during the last session, and it's the same for this session as well. I heard that he would be going through his god's test in the second heaven. Once he passes through it, he will become a disciple of universe god in the second heaven. By then, it would be hopeless for him to get the first place in the battle. To be able to win the first place for the battle is impressive enough. Everyone was astonished. At the beginning of the battle, the disciples of Star Palace and ordinary disciples would take part. If one were to perform a failing power, the disciples of Star Palace might be degraded into an ordinary disciple, while the ordinary disciples might stand a chance to become disciples of Star Palace. Considering the current session's participants, it was expected that the 5 quotas for the disciples of Star Palace were within everyone's abilities. When the battle among universe gods in the first heaven ended, it would naturally be followed by a battle amongst universe gods in the second heaven. All disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven, please come forward. A deacon elderly gathered them on Titanic Star. All of the disciples who were universe gods in the second heaven, and the few disciples of Star Palace, including Jian Wushuang, stepped foot on Titanic's star one after another. Disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of star are more than universe gods in the first heaven. Jian Wushuang looked around. Including himself, there was a total of 52 universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of star. Some of the disciples stayed in Mystery Land or wandered outside for a long time. Some cultivated in seclusion. Hence, Jian Wushuang didn't see them much. Until before the battle started, these disciples were gathered together. 52 genius disciples fighting for only 5 quotas of disciples of Star Palace. The 4 of them. Jian Wushuang looked at 4 people in the crowd. The 4 of them were like him, disciples of Star Palace. The one that most revered was a handsome youth. The handsome youth had a gentle smile that people found friendly. However, everyone around him knew how scary that person was. He's the strongest amongst the disciples who are universe gods in the second heaven in lineage of star, Ling Feibai. Jian Wushuang looked at the handsome youth, and his pupils contracted. In the past years of him staying in lineage of star, he had found out about the top geniuses in lineage of star. Amongst universe gods in the second heaven, Ling Feibai was undeniably the top. Just like Duan Tianhong, who had won first place among universe gods in the first heaven. Maybe even scarier. It is said that Ling Feibai once fought a peak universe god in the third heaven when he was wandering outside. In the end, they were tied. Jian Wushuang recalled his fighting results and gasped in silence. A universe god in the second heaven, who was on par with a peak universe god in the third heaven. Ling Feibai wasn't an inverse cultivator. With his fighting result, he wasn't looked down upon. There were many disciples who were universe gods in the second heaven, who treated Ling Feibai as a true monster. No one had the guts to fight against him. Of course, among those people, Jian Wushuang was not included. Ling Feibai, I really want to fight him. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands together and smiled faintly. Besides Ling Feibai, the other 3 disciples of Star Palace weren't weak either. Amongst them, there was Xia Feng, who had bad beef with Jian Wushuang. He was extremely powerful too. However, besides the few disciples of Star Palace, the rest of the people, even the strongest among ordinary disciples, Luo Quan, Jian Wushuang didn't care about. It is needless for me to say the rules. Whoever's name is called, please head over to the tower. The deacon elderly's voice spread, and he started reading names. First Lu Yun. Then, the ordinary disciple Lu Yun, whose name was called, immediately walked towards the wormhole and stepped into it. After she entered the wormhole, she came out in a few breaths' time. When she came out, she looked like a mess and she looked embarrassed too. Next, a disciple entered the tower. Most of them stayed in the tower for about 10 breaths' time. It was the standard of a normal ordinary disciple. Those who were more outstanding, such as Luo Quan, Lu Han and the other few, stayed for more than 15 breaths' time in the tower. As for the few disciples of Star Palace, they performed even better. Especially Ling Feibai. Virum. When Ling Feibai came out from the wormhole, it was dead silent in the Titanic star. Everyone looked at Ling Feibai in astonishment. There was surge of emotion in everyone's heart. 41 breaths' time. He stayed in the tower for 41 breaths' time. Oh my God! Besides him, the other one who performed the best among the disciples, who are universe gods in the second heaven, merely stayed in the tower for 20 breaths' time. This is unheard of. Ling Feibai is so scary. Everyone was shocked. Everyone found it unbelievable. Ling Feibai's performance was too astonishing. This young man, Xia Feng in the scarlet robe, who was a disciple of Star Palace, shook his head in silence. He obviously couldn't be compared favorably. That monster. Luo Quan gasped in silence. He was the top among the ordinary disciples. In the battle, he stood a chance to grab the quota to be a disciple of Star Palace. However, even if he became a disciple of Star Palace, he wasn't bold enough to challenge Ling Feibai. He stayed in the tower for 41 breaths' time. Ling Feibai is really amazing, Jian Wushuang complimented. The battle continued, and the disciples entered the tower one after another. Soon it was Jian Wushuang's turn. Next, Jian Wushuang. Along with the deacon elderly's calling, everyone's gazes suddenly fixed on Jian Wushuang. Those gazes were strange. Among them were some who were sneering, taunting and making fun of him. Look, disciples in Star Palace, our senior Jian Wushuang is here. Jian Wushuang? I have been wandering in Mystery Land. I didn't know him. But when I returned, I saw the mirror images of him fighting with other disciples. I've got to ask, how did he even qualify to be a disciple of Star Palace? Who knows? It doesn't matter now. He will become an ordinary disciple after the battle. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.